Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're looking for some wild family drama to fall asleep to, you're in exactly the right place. Tonight I'm diving into some of the most ridiculous stories from Reddit where family members have absolutely lost their minds over things that really shouldn't matter that much. I'm talking entitled parents, selfish siblings, and relatives who seem to think that the normal rules of courtesy and respect just don't apply to them. Before we get into this madness, just grab your favourite drink, get comfortable, and let's explore some stories that will probably make you wonder if these people even have a shred of common sense. Our first story comes from someone who had to deal with a father who had some very creative interpretations of what's appropriate to wear to a wedding. My dad showed up to my wedding wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and when I confronted him about it, he said he didn't believe in formal wear. So basically, I've been planning this wedding for about a year and a half. It was supposed to be this beautiful, elegant ceremony with everything we'd been dreaming about. We sent out invitations with a black tie dress code spelled out pretty clearly, and we even included a note about the dress code on the website. My parents confirmed multiple times that they understood and that they'd dress appropriately. My mum looked absolutely stunning in this gorgeous floor-length navy dress. My sisters were in their bridesmaid gowns. Everyone who came to that wedding was dressed beautifully for the occasion. And then my dad showed up in ripped jeans and a faded graphic t-shirt. I noticed when he walked into the church, and my first thought was that he must have had some kind of emergency where he didn't have time to change. But no, when I pulled him aside during the pictures, he told me that he doesn't believe in formal wear and that the wedding was about celebrating love, not fashion choices. He said that me asking him to wear a suit was basically asking him to be fake and inauthentic. I tried to explain that the dress code wasn't about being fake, it was about showing respect for the occasion and the other guests who had made an effort. He got defensive and said that if I truly loved him, I would accept him as he was, ripped jeans and all. The photographer kept trying to work around him in the photos because the contrast between his outfit and everyone else's was pretty jarring. My mum was mortified. She kept whispering to me that she'd tried to talk to him about it that morning, but he refused to listen. Apparently, she'd laid out a suit for him before they left the house, and he literally refused to put it on. He spent half the morning arguing with her about how fashion was a social construct meant to control people or something. Or, during the reception, my dad made this whole announcement about how he was proud to be the one person at the wedding who wasn't a slave to fashion expectations. He literally said that from the microphone while everyone was eating dinner. Multiple guests came up to my mum afterward, asking if everything was okay with my dad, assuming something had gone wrong. People were genuinely confused about why one of the parents was dressed like he was going to a casual backyard barbecue. My dad even made jokes throughout the evening about all the overdressed people and how sad it was that society had put so much pressure on formal events. The worst part is that he doesn't think he did anything wrong. He actually told people at the reception that he was the real hero for refusing to participate in fashion conformity. He said he was making a statement against rigid social norms. My mum was apologising to guests all night, and my husband kept asking if my dad had lost his mind. I still have this amazing wedding album, and it's beautiful, but there's this constant visual reminder of my dad's complete disregard for the one request I had for my special day. He wasn't sick. He didn't have a legitimate excuse. He just fundamentally believes that getting dressed up is beneath him, even when it's for his daughter's wedding. To this day, when I look at the formal family photos, I see my mum and sisters in their elegant outfits, my husband in his perfectly tailored suit, and then my dad in ripped jeans like he showed up to mow the lawn instead of walk his daughter down the aisle. We haven't really talked about it since, and I'm honestly still too angry to bring it up again. My husband jokes about it sometimes, like he'll make comments about how my dad was clearly the most comfortable guest at the reception. But it's not funny to me. I just wanted one day where my dad would set aside his opinions about fashion and show up for me. Apparently, that was too much to ask. My mum still feels awful about the whole thing. She said she spent half the wedding thinking about how embarrassed she felt, and not in a fun way. She was just mortified that her husband had made such a statement with his outfit choice. That's the end of that story. So your dad literally showed up to your wedding, looking like he just rolled out of bed, made a public announcement about it, and then acted like he was some kind of rebel for refusing to wear pants without holes in them. The audacity to lecture people about fashion conformity at someone else's wedding reception. Most parents want to look nice for their kid's big day. This guy treated it like a personal platform for his anti-clothing crusade. Let's move on to our next story about a brother who had very different values when it came to personal property. My brother tried to sell my old toys on eBay, and when I found out, he'd already sold them for practically nothing. So I've been living in my own place for about 5 years now. I went back to my parents' house to help my mum clean out the garage because they were planning to renovate and make it into a workspace. While I was going through some boxes, I found a collection of vintage action figures and collectibles that I'd kept since I was a kid. These weren't just any toys. They were things I'd been collecting since the late 90s. There were unopened collectible boxes, rare Star Wars figures still in original packaging, and some other stuff that I actually knew had real value. I'd kept them specifically because I thought they might be worth something someday, but more importantly, they had sentimental value to me. I asked my mum if she could set them aside for me because I wanted to move them to my new place eventually. She said no problem and put them in a corner of the garage marked with my name. A few weeks passed and I was busy with work, so I didn't think much about it. Then one day, I got a message from my brother saying that he'd noticed those toys in the garage and was wondering if he could use them. I thought he meant he wanted to play with them or display them or something. So I just said no, those were mine and had sentimental value. He said okay, no worries. But then I got a call from my mum saying that she'd gone into my storage area and found the boxes were gone. My mum was confused because she specifically remembered putting them there. I started to panic because I had a feeling about where they went. I texted my brother asking if he knew where my toys were. He took like an hour to respond, and when he did, his message just said, "Yeah, about that." Turns out my brother had taken the boxes without asking, listed them on eBay, and sold them. But here's the real kicker. He sold them all for $20 total. I couldn't believe it. I looked up the specific items later, and those figures were worth easily a few $100s, maybe more. Some of those unopened Star Wars figures alone should have gone for $50 to $100 each. But my brother had just tossed them up there without doing any research, with terrible photos, and sold them instantly for basically nothing. When I called him out on it, he claimed he thought they were just old junk that nobody wanted. He said he was doing me a favour by clearing them out. He said he needed some quick cash for something and figured those toys weren't worth keeping around. He actually acted like I should be grateful that he'd handled the storage issue for me. I was absolutely furious. I told him those were my things, he had no right to sell them, and he'd just destroyed value that took me years to collect. He got defensive and said that it wasn't a big deal. Toys were just toys, and I was being ridiculous about the monetary value. He said if they were so important to me, I should have moved them already, instead of leaving them in the garage. The fact that he sold them for $20 made me even angrier, because it meant he obviously didn't care about getting fair value. He just wanted them gone. When I told my parents what happened, my mum was upset with my brother too, but my dad kind of took his side, saying that it wasn't that serious since they were just old toys. But to me, this was about respect and boundaries. My brother literally took my property without permission and sold it. He didn't ask, he didn't try to find out what it was worth, he just assumed he could do whatever he wanted with my stuff. I'm still not over this whole thing. My brother apologised, sort of, but his apology was more like he was sorry I was upset, not sorry for what he actually did. He offered to pay me the $20 back, which just made me angrier because that proved he knew he was wrong the whole time. If he thought he was doing me a favour, why would he offer to pay me? I haven't really talked to him much since this happened. We're civil when we see each other at family events, but there's this resentment there now. I trusted him to respect my belongings, and he completely violated that trust for basically nothing. The part that really gets to me when I think back on this is that my brother never really showed any actual remorse. He apologized because I was angry, not because he understood what he'd done. He didn't understand that he'd sold something that represented years of my collecting hobby and personal memories. Those figures meant something to me beyond just their monetary value, but he treated them like trash he was doing me a favor by removing. If he'd asked first, if he'd been honest about his situation, maybe we could have worked something out, but he just took them. That's what the whole situation comes down to for me. It's not really about the money anymore, though I still think about what I could have done with those items. It's about the violation of trust and the complete lack of respect for my property and my feelings. That's the end of that story. Your brother literally stole your collectibles, sold them for a fraction of what they were worth, and then acted confused about why you were upset. The fact that he offered to repay you $20 shows he absolutely knew he'd messed up. He just didn't care enough to do it right. Now let's talk about someone whose aunt had no concept of appropriate timing or consideration. My aunt brought her new boyfriend to Thanksgiving without warning, and he proposed to her in the middle of dinner. So it was Thanksgiving and my whole extended family had gathered at my grandma's house, like we do every year. We're talking about 50 people, maybe more, the whole family. My aunt, who I'll call Susan, had recently gotten out of a long relationship and had been dating this new guy for maybe 4 months. Nobody in the family had met him yet, and we were all curious about who he was. She texted my grandma a few days before to say she was bringing someone, but she didn't give a lot of details. She just said she wanted everyone to meet him. So at dinner, Susan shows up with this guy we've never seen before. He seemed nice enough, friendly, polite, fit in okay during the initial conversations. We were all in the dining room eating, and everyone was kind of sizing him up. You know, trying to figure out if this was a serious thing or just casual dating. The dinner was going smoothly. We'd gotten through appetizers, and were in the middle of the main course when suddenly this guy stands up. He literally stood up in the middle of dinner while people were eating. He tapped his fork on his glass to get everyone's attention. My grandma was still chewing. My uncle was mid-bite of stuffing. And this guy announced that he had something important to say to Susan. My heart sank because I immediately knew what was about to happen. He got down on one knee right there in the middle of the dining room and pulled out a ring. He proposed to Susan in front of the entire family, with zero warning, zero setup, nothing. Susan looked shocked, like genuinely shocked, which should have been her first clue about whether this was actually a good idea. She said yes, obviously, because what else do you do when someone proposes in front of 50 people? But the whole dynamic of the meal completely changed. Suddenly everyone was focused on Susan's engagement instead of enjoying Thanksgiving. People started crying, cousins were screaming, someone was trying to take a photo. It was chaos. The turkey got cold because nobody was eating anymore. My grandma looked upset because she'd prepared this whole meal and it was completely overshadowed. My uncle, who's usually quiet, just kind of shook his head and went back to eating, clearly unimpressed. The thing that really bothered me about the whole situation was that Susan didn't even check if it was okay to bring him in the first place. She didn't give us time to process meeting him. She didn't give him time to actually get to know the family. She just showed up, and suddenly we're all invited to an engagement celebration that happened at my grandma's dining room table. There was no build-up, no relationship foundation that we could see, nothing. 4 months. This guy had been dating Susan for 4 months, and he thought it was a good idea to propose at a family dinner, where he was meeting literally everyone for the first time. My grandma's Thanksgiving was hijacked. She spent all day cooking, and instead of people being grateful and enjoying the meal, they were all focused on a surprise engagement announcement. Susan seemed happy about the engagement, so I didn't want to be unsupportive, but the whole thing felt rushed and inconsiderate to literally everyone there. My grandma mentioned later that she'd been excited about showing off her cooking and having the family all together, and she felt like the meal got turned into a secondary event. Some of my cousins were upset that such a major family announcement happened at Thanksgiving instead of at a special date just for them. The guy seemed decent when I talked to him, but I still don't really understand the logic of proposing at someone else's holiday gathering when you're meeting their family for the first time. Later, Susan told me that her boyfriend thought it would be romantic and memorable. Well, it was certainly memorable, but maybe not in the way he hoped. The engagement gave her a reason to take over more family conversations and events, which was kind of annoying because suddenly everything became about Susan's wedding plans. We were supposed to have family time, but instead we had engagement time. The whole Thanksgiving felt like a setup for a proposal that nobody else got to be excited about in advance. It was just sprung on us. I talked to my cousins about it afterward, and they all had similar feelings. We felt like Susan had taken this major family holiday and turned it into her engagement party. Thanksgiving should be about gratitude and spending time together as a family. Instead, it became about Susan and her relationship. And because the proposal was such a big shock, everyone kind of forgot about the actual holiday being celebrated. Edited. My uncle even made a comment during dessert that he couldn't remember what he was supposed to be grateful for because everything had been overshadowed by the engagement announcement. There was also a weird awkwardness where nobody quite knew if we should be celebrating Susan or if we should go back to celebrating Thanksgiving. The proposal upstaged literally everything. When my grandma talks about that Thanksgiving now, she doesn't talk about how the meal turned out or about family time. She talks about Susan's engagement. That whole holiday got redefined by one moment that Susan's boyfriend decided would be the perfect time for a proposal. I think about what Thanksgiving would have felt like if Susan had just let it be what it was meant to be. That's the end of that story. So your aunt's boyfriend essentially used a family holiday meal to make a statement about his relationship, instead of giving anyone, including your aunt, a heads up that this was coming. 4 months and a Thanksgiving dinner. Definitely the foundation of a lasting marriage. Let's get into a story about a mum who took micromanaging to a whole new level with some questionable judgment. My mum told my teacher I was failing just to embarrass me and said it was character building. I was in 10th grade when this happened. We had this project for English class that was worth a significant portion of our grade. It was basically a research paper combined with a presentation, and we had months to work on it. I was working on it, but I wasn't prioritising it the way I should have been, because I was busy with other stuff. I had a B in the class overall, which was fine, but my grade on the specific assignment was going to be lower if I didn't put in more effort. My teacher sent home a progress report saying that while I was doing okay overall, this particular project needed work and she wanted to see improvement. It was constructive feedback. She wasn't being mean about it. She was just being direct. I showed the progress report to my mum, probably because I thought she'd forget about it if I didn't. Big mistake. Instead of talking to me about ways to improve, my mum decided that my grade needed to be motivated by public humiliation. I had no idea she was planning this. She showed up at school during my lunch period without telling me. She walked into the cafeteria where I was eating with my friends and asked me to step outside. I was confused and a little worried. Then she told me she'd already gone to find my English teacher and had told her all about how I was struggling with grades and how disappointed she was in my academic performance. She went into detail about everything apparently, and she'd done this specifically so that the teacher would know to keep an eye on me and potentially call me out in class or during discussions. My mum's reasoning was that public embarrassment would light a fire under me and make me get my act together. She believed that if I was humiliated in front of my classmates, I'd be motivated to do better. She didn't think she was being cruel. She genuinely thought she was helping. But what actually happened was that I felt completely betrayed. My friends all knew something had happened because my mum had walked me out publicly. Other kids started asking questions. Word got around that my mum had come to school to talk to my teacher about my grades. I felt like everyone was looking at me differently after that, and my relationship with my teacher became uncomfortable because she now had this pressure from my mum to report on my progress. It wasn't a natural learning environment anymore. It was something loaded with parental expectations and monitoring. I actually started doing worse on the project because I was so stressed and anxious about all the attention on it. My confidence tanked. I wasn't focused on learning the material. I was focused on the fact that my mum had gone behind my back and tried to use shame as a motivational tool. When I got my grade back, it was lower than it would have been if she'd just let me handle it myself. I told her that her plan had backfired and that she'd made things worse. She didn't really accept that explanation. She said I should be grateful that she cared enough to intervene and that my hurt feelings weren't as important as my education. She claimed she was trying to teach me a lesson about accountability, but the only lesson I learned was that I couldn't trust my mum to respect my privacy or my dignity. I actually ended up talking to my school counsellor about what had happened, and the counsellor was very clear that my mum's intervention had crossed a line. She said that undermining my independence like that was actually harmful to my development. She suggested that I talk to my mum about boundaries, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that at the time because I was still too embarrassed and hurt by what she'd done. The whole experience created this lasting rift between me and my mum when it comes to my education and personal life. I became secretive about my struggles because I was terrified of what she might do if she found out about them. Years later, we've talked about it and she's apologised somewhat, but she still maintains that she was trying to help. She just didn't understand that there were better ways to motivate me that didn't involve public humiliation and betrayal of trust. I'm in college now, and I definitely don't tell my mum about any academic struggles because I'm worried about what she might do. She still brings it up sometimes in a way that suggests she thinks she was right. Like she'll mention a time when I improved my performance after she intervened, and she'll act like that proves her method worked. But she doesn't see the broader damage it did to my confidence and my ability to ask for help when I actually needed it. I became someone who hides problems instead of facing them because I learned that asking for support from my mum would result in public humiliation. That was a terrible lesson to teach a teenager. I wish she could understand that now, but I've kind of accepted that she might never fully grasp how harmful that experience was. That's the end of that story. Your mum literally weaponized shame as a parenting strategy and then acted shocked when it made things worse. She traded her child's academic confidence for a misguided idea of character building. That's not parenting. That's psychological manipulation dressed up as tough love. Moving on to a story about a sister who had some truly creative timing for major life announcements. My sister got engaged at my birthday dinner and she brought her own cake. So I was turning 25 and my parents had taken me out to this nice restaurant that I love. We'd made reservations weeks in advance and I was really looking forward to it. My sister came along with her boyfriend and I thought it was going to be this nice family celebration. We ordered dinner and everything was going great. The conversation was flowing. I was enjoying being the centre of attention without it being excessive or weird. My parents were asking about work and my life and all that normal stuff. When we finished the main course, our server came over and asked if we wanted to see the dessert menu. I was thinking about maybe sharing something with my family since they have really good tiramisu at this place. That's when my sister announced that she had something special. She pulled out a box from under the table and opened it to reveal a cake. But this wasn't just any cake. It was a custom cake with her and her boyfriend's names on it and little decorations that said, engaged. I froze. My sister was getting engaged at my birthday dinner at the restaurant, using a dessert that she'd prepared in advance and brought herself. She had literally anticipated that this moment would overshadow my birthday and decided to make that happen anyway. What made it worse was that she clearly had this all planned. She'd coordinated with her boyfriend. She'd ordered a custom cake. She'd brought it to the restaurant in her own bag. This wasn't a spontaneous moment of happiness. This was a calculated decision to make my birthday about her engagement. She probably thought it would be romantic or exciting to have this happen in front of my parents at a birthday dinner. But what actually happened was that my special night got completely taken over. My parents looked shocked. There was this awkward pause where nobody really knew how to react. My sister seemed to think we'd all be thrilled and excited for her, but mostly everyone just felt uncomfortable. My mum asked her what she was doing, and my sister got defensive. She said she was sharing good news with her family and that we should be happy for her. She seemed genuinely surprised that I wasn't enthusiastic about having my birthday hijacked by her engagement announcement. She said it was a bonus to the evening. She said having 2 celebrations at once was better than having one. I tried to explain that this was my special day and that I would have appreciated if she'd waited to announce something this big at a different time. She got upset and said I was being selfish for not being happy about her engagement. She said that just because it was my birthday didn't mean we couldn't celebrate her too. The whole thing turned awkward really fast. My boyfriend tried to lighten the mood, but the energy at the table was definitely off. My parents tried to move forward with the celebration, but it was clear that the moment had been stolen. We were supposed to be celebrating me turning 25. Instead, we were now expected to celebrate her engagement. The cake she brought was really good, I'll admit that, but I would have honestly preferred the restaurant's tiramisu without all the drama. What bothered me most was that my sister claimed to not understand why I was upset. According to her, sharing 2 celebrations in one evening was something to be grateful for. She said she wasn't trying to take away from my birthday. She was just adding to it. But that's not how it worked. The attention shifted completely. Conversations that were about me and my life suddenly became about her and her future. She got to make the announcement. She got to show off her ring. She got the reactions from our parents. My birthday became background noise to her engagement. Weeks later, when I tried to talk to her about how I was feeling, she apologized, but in a really half-hearted way. She said I was being too sensitive, and that in the future I should understand that sometimes family events have to involve multiple celebrations. She didn't actually grasp that what she did was inconsiderate and self-centered. She just thought I needed to get over it and share the joy. I'm still a little bitter about it, honestly. It's a weird feeling to have your birthday taken over by someone else's major life moment. And the fact that she premeditated the whole thing by bringing her own cake makes it feel even more calculated. This wasn't an impulsive moment of excitement. She'd thought it through, decided her announcement was more important than my birthday, and executed accordingly. My boyfriend reminded me that my sister probably didn't mean it as a personal attack, but that doesn't really change how it felt. It felt like she didn't consider my feelings at all when she made the decision to hijack my birthday dinner. She decided that her engagement was more important than my moment. And honestly, that says something about how she views our relationship. When it came down to a choice between making my birthday special and making her announcement special, she chose her announcement. I haven't been as close with her since that happened. We see each other at family functions, but I don't confide in her anymore. She doesn't understand why I'm still upset about it, which just makes me more upset because it means she doesn't understand why her actions were wrong. That's the end of that story. Your sister literally brought her own engagement cake to your birthday dinner, like your special day was the perfect time and place to redirect everyone's focus to her. The premeditation makes it even worse because this wasn't a moment of excitement that just happened. She planned it that way on purpose. My cousin took out a credit card in my name and racked up thousands in debt without my knowledge. So I was going through my mail one day, just regular stuff, bills and advertisements and whatever. I got this letter from a credit card company I'd never heard of, and it was addressed to me at my current address. That was weird because I don't have that many credit cards, and I definitely didn't apply for one recently. I opened it up, and it was a credit card statement for a card I never applied for. The balance was already over $4,000. I felt my stomach drop. I immediately called the credit card company to ask what was going on. I explained that I hadn't opened this account. The representative pulled up my information and confirmed that the card had been opened 6 months ago in my name, using my social security number. When I asked for the details on the charges, I found out that the card had been used consistently over those 6 months. Groceries, restaurants, gas, online shopping, just regular stuff but adding up to thousands of dollars. I was in complete shock. Someone had stolen my identity and opened a credit card. My first instinct was to call the police, but before I did that, I wanted to figure out who could have done this. I started thinking about who had access to my personal information. My parents had some of it, obviously. My siblings knew stuff, and my cousin had visited my apartment several months ago. When I checked the dates on the credit card statements more carefully, they lined up with when my cousin had been staying with me. I called my cousin directly. I asked him flat out if he knew anything about a credit card in my name. There was this silence, and then he started stammering and making excuses. He finally admitted it. He'd taken my social security number from a document he found while he was at my apartment. He'd filled out an application online and had the card sent to my address. He figured I wouldn't notice for a while because I didn't check my mail frequently. He was right about that. I was furious. I asked him why he would do something like that, and his excuse was that he was in financial trouble. He said he was short on cash and didn't have good credit, so he couldn't get his own card. He thought he could pay it back before I found out, but obviously he hadn't. He hadn't paid anything. He'd just been charging stuff on my card while I had no idea it was happening. I told him he needed to contact the credit card company immediately and explain what he'd done. He got defensive and said that wasn't his responsibility. He said I needed to handle it since it was my card. That was the most infuriating part of this whole thing. He committed fraud in my name and then expected me to clean up the mess. I went to the credit card company and reported it as identity theft. The process was a nightmare. I had to fill out fraud reports. I had to dispute every single charge. The company was skeptical at first because I'd given my cousin access to my home. So technically, I'd given someone trusted access to my personal information. But eventually, they believed me when I explained that he'd stolen my social security number without permission. It took months to get the fraudulent charges removed. During that time, the card was showing on my credit report as an account with thousands of dollars in debt. My credit score dropped significantly. It affected everything. When I tried to get approved for a car loan, I got denied. My interest rate on a personal loan went up, all because my cousin decided my identity was his to use. When I confronted him about the damage it had caused, he seemed to think it was no big deal. He said I was making it worse than it was by reporting it to the police. He said it was family money and that I was being selfish for not just helping him out. He actually tried to justify the whole thing by saying he was desperate. But desperation doesn't give you the right to commit fraud against your own family member. I had to hire a lawyer to make sure everything was handled properly and to protect myself legally. I had to dispute charges one by one. I had to put fraud alerts on my credit report. It was the most stressful, time-consuming mess. And my cousin never really apologized. He acted like I was the problem for taking it so seriously. My family was divided on the whole thing. Some people understood why I was upset, but others thought I should have just helped him out without involving the authorities. They said family should help each other, but that's not helping. That's enabling someone to commit crimes. My cousin never paid back a single dollar of what he owed. The credit card company eventually had to write it off as fraud, but the damage to my credit remained for years. I had to rebuild my credit score from scratch. I had to be extremely cautious about what personal information I shared. I still have some residual anxiety about checking my mail and my credit reports because I'm worried something like this will happen again. The worst part is that my cousin never faced any real consequences. He didn't go to jail. He didn't have to pay restitution. He just walked away from the situation like nothing happened. My family still sees him at gatherings, and there's this awkwardness because everyone knows what he did, but nobody wants to actually address it. He acts like it never happened. I've learned to keep my distance. I don't tell him personal information anymore. I don't invite him to my home. But it's sad because we used to be close, and his selfishness and dishonesty destroyed that relationship. I should have been more careful about who I trusted with my information. But I never thought my own family member would do something like this. My grandma changed her will every year to punish people in the family for perceived slights. So my grandmother was always a bit dramatic. She liked being the centre of attention, and she definitely liked having control over her family. She was wealthy from my grandfather's life insurance and investments, and she made sure everyone knew that meant she could make or break people's futures financially. For as long as I can remember, there were conversations at family gatherings about who was in the will and who wasn't. Grandma would casually mention it to people, like it was small talk. She'd say things like, "Well, you're still in my will for now." Or she'd tell someone, "I'm rethinking whether I should leave anything to anyone who doesn't appreciate me." It was this constant threat hanging over everybody's head. Every single year, usually around her birthday or Christmas, Grandma would announce that she'd made changes to her will. It became this weird tradition where the entire family would speculate about what happened and who she was angry with. One year, my uncle didn't visit her on her birthday because he had to work late. She called him and told him she was removing him from the will. She said his job was more important than family, and she would make sure he suffered the consequences. My uncle tried to apologise and explain, but she wouldn't listen. The next year, after he grovelled enough, she added him back. But there was always this pressure. You had to stay on Grandma's good side or risk being financially cut off. My mum learnt to be extremely careful. She'd call Grandma constantly, visit regularly, remember every detail Grandma told her. It was exhausting watching my mum basically perform for my grandmother to maintain her place in the will. If my mum forgot to send a birthday card, she'd hear about it. If she didn't laugh at Grandma's jokes, Grandma would get moody. If she didn't agree with Grandma's opinions about politics or family matters, it became this whole thing. The will changes affected everyone differently. Some people tried really hard to stay on Grandma's good side. Others kind of gave up and didn't bother trying to appease her, figuring they'd never be in the will anyway. So why stress about it? That created a weird family dynamic where some people were constantly trying to prove themselves to Gran DMA while others had basically written themselves off. Family gatherings became tense because you never quite knew where you stood with Grandma or who she was currently mad at. She'd use the will as leverage to control people's behaviour. If she didn't like a significant other someone brought to dinner, she'd threaten to cut that person out of the will and leave everything to the other sibling instead. She'd use it as motivation to get people to make life choices she approved of. She was constantly saying things like, "If you marry that person, don't expect to inherit anything," or "If you move away for that job, you're making a huge mistake, and you'll be out of my will." It was psychological manipulation, disguised as family concern. When Grandma died, everyone was shocked to find out that her final will left most of her estate to a charity she'd recently become interested in. Turns out she'd been so busy changing her will to punish different family members that she'd actually shifted her focus entirely. The money that everyone had been fighting over and trying to earn her approval for went to an organisation instead of to any of us. There were still some bequests to family members, but they were relatively small compared to what people had expected. My mum, who had spent years catering to Grandma's moods and performing for her approval, got a modest amount. My uncle, who had tried harder to rebel and be himself, got about the same thing. The cousins, who had completely given up, got slightly less. It was almost like Grandma's final message was that none of us deserved her money because we'd all failed to be what she wanted us to be in some way. The real tragedy was the family relationships that had been damaged by this constant jockeying for position in the will. My parents had sacrificed time, energy, and authenticity trying to stay on Grandma's good side. My uncle and Grandma had this terrible relationship by the end because he'd stopped trying to appease her. Cousins, who could have been close, had become competitors. The whole family had been pitted against each other by this woman who treated her will like a weapon. And in the end, nobody got what they thought they would. The money went to strangers. I think my grandmother actually enjoyed the control more than she would have enjoyed being generous with her wealth. As long as the family was uncertain and competing for her approval, she had power over us. The moment she was gone, we realised that the will had just been a tool for manipulation all along. We were never actually going to be satisfied because the goal was never about giving us money. The goal was about keeping us emotionally invested in her and dependent on her approval. My dad gave away my car while I was studying abroad, and he said I wasn't using it anyway. So I was doing a semester abroad in Europe for college. It was this amazing opportunity to study art history in Italy for 4 months. Before I left, I had a car that I'd been saving up for and bought myself with money from working. It was older, but it ran great, and I was really proud of it because I'd earned it myself. Before I left for Europe, I talked to my parents about what I should do with my car while I was gone. I didn't want to just leave it sitting in their driveway for 4 months because that didn't seem great for the engine or anything. We discussed a few options. One was that I could sell it, but that seemed like a hassle since I was already stressed about the trip. Another option was that my parents could use it while I was gone if they needed a second car. My dad said, "Yeah, we'll just keep an eye on it. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine." I figured that meant they'd start it occasionally and maybe use it if needed. That seemed like a good solution. I left for my semester abroad feeling good about my decision. I was excited about my studies. I wasn't worried about my car. Fast forward 3 months. I'm in Italy, having the time of my life. I video call my parents like once a week, and everything seems normal. Then I get a call from a friend who's still at home. She asks me if I gave my car to someone. I'm confused and I ask her what she means. She tells me that my dad had given my car to my cousin, who had just gotten his license and needed a car. She said she'd seen my cousin driving around in it several times. I felt this moment of complete shock and then anger. I called my dad immediately. I asked him what was going on with my car. He acted like it was no big deal. He said that my cousin needed a car because he'd just gotten his license and couldn't afford to buy one. He said my car was just sitting there not being used, so he figured it made sense to let my cousin borrow it. But here's the thing. He didn't just lend it to him. My dad essentially gave my cousin my car. He transferred the registration or did whatever paperwork was necessary to make it official. He never asked my permission. He just decided that my car should be my cousin's car. I was furious. I told my dad that he had no right to give away my car. I told him it was my property and I'd paid for it myself. He got defensive and said I was being unreasonable. He said I was in Europe and not using the car, so why did it matter? He said my cousin really needed it and I was being selfish by not wanting to help out. He said family should help each other. I tried to explain to him that there's a difference between borrowing something temporarily and just giving it away without asking. I said if he'd asked me, I might have actually been willing to let my cousin borrow it, but I wasn't willing to just give it to him, especially without being asked. My dad didn't see the issue. He said the car was going to waste just sitting in the driveway, so he was actually being practical by letting my cousin use it. He said I'd be able to buy another car whenever I wanted, since I obviously had the capability to earn money and purchase vehicles. His logic was that my cousin was more in need of the car right now than I was. I was speechless. I came home from my semester abroad feeling excited and wanted to see my car, and I found out that my dad had just given it away. I couldn't get it back because the paperwork had all been changed over. My cousin was the legal owner now. I was heartbroken. That car represented something to me. It represented my work ethic and my ability to earn something and take care of it myself. My dad had taken that away without asking. He'd decided that his priority was helping my cousin more than respecting my property rights. When I tried to discuss it with my parents after I got home, my dad still didn't see what he'd done wrong. He said I was being dramatic about a car. He said that family helped each other and that my cousin getting a car was more important than me having my specific car. My mum tried to be more understanding, but ultimately sided with my dad. She said they were just trying to help, and I should be happy that I could help my cousin indirectly. I was not happy. I was angry and hurt and felt deeply disrespected. My dad had made a major decision about my property without my input. He'd prioritised my cousin's needs over my autonomy and my right to make decisions about my own belongings. We didn't really resolve it. I couldn't resolve it because the car was gone and the paperwork was done. I just had to accept that my dad had violated my trust and my property rights. Our relationship took a hit from that because I realized that my dad doesn't respect my autonomy as an adult. If I'm not there to physically protect my possessions, he's willing to make decisions about them without me. That's not something I can just forget about. My stepbrother told everyone I was adopted and kept insisting it was true even after I showed him baby pictures. So I grew up with my stepbrother from when I was about 7 years old. My mum married his dad, and they blended our families. My stepbrother was a few years older than me, and we had a pretty normal sibling relationship. We fought sometimes, we got along sometimes, it was whatever. My stepbrother never seemed to have a problem with the fact that I was a step-sibling, or so I thought. Fast forward to high school, and I started noticing that my stepbrother was telling people that I was adopted. Not that I had a step-sibling relationship with him, specifically that I was adopted by my mum. It was this weird lie that I couldn't quite figure out why he was spreading. The first time I heard about it was when someone asked me about my adoption, and I was confused. I told them I wasn't adopted, that my mum was my biological mother. They seemed surprised and said that my stepbrother had told them I was adopted. I honestly didn't think much of it at first, I just assumed he'd misspoke or something. But it kept happening. Different people at school would ask me about my adoption. People at church who knew my family would ask about it. It was becoming this weird thing where everyone seemed to think I was adopted because my stepbrother had told them. I finally asked my stepbrother directly why he was telling people I was adopted. He got defensive immediately. He said it wasn't a big deal and that he was just joking around. He said it was funny because people believed him. He said he didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of it. I tried to explain to him that it wasn't true and that he shouldn't be spreading false information about me. I told him that people were actually believing him and it was affecting how people saw me. He just rolled his eyes and said I was being too sensitive. The weird part was that I actually offered to show him the proof, and I brought out my baby pictures. I showed him pictures of me as a newborn with my mum in the hospital. I showed him photos from when I was a baby, and my mum was holding me, looking exhausted, like she'd just given birth. I had concrete proof that I was not adopted, but my stepbrother didn't care. He looked at the pictures and then said something like, "Yeah, well, you could have been adopted after that." It was this ridiculous logic where no amount of evidence would convince him because he'd decided that I was adopted and nothing was going to change his mind. I asked him why he even cared. Why did it matter to him whether I was adopted or biological? He couldn't give me a good answer. He just said it was funny and that people seemed to think it was interesting information. I think deep down he liked being the one who knew something about me that I supposedly didn't know about myself. He liked having this information that made me seem different or unusual. I don't think he was necessarily being malicious, but he was being thoughtless and hurtful. My mum found out about the whole thing and she was irritated. She talked to my stepbrother about it. She tried to explain to him that spreading false information about me was not okay, but he still didn't seem to get it. He kept insisting that he was joking and that I needed to learn to take a joke. For a while, having people ask me about my adoption got really old. I had to keep explaining that I wasn't adopted. Some people didn't believe me, even after I explained. They thought my stepbrother knew something that I didn't, or that I was in denial about being adopted. It was frustrating and embarrassing. Eventually, the whole thing died down because people lost interest in the rumour. But the damage was done to my relationship with my stepbrother. I realised that he didn't respect me or my privacy. He was willing to spread false information about me for his own entertainment. He didn't care how it made me feel or what the social consequences were for me. When I think back on it, it was a pretty mean thing to do, and the fact that he couldn't even acknowledge that it was mean makes it worse. He still acts like it was just a harmless joke that I'm making too big of a deal about. My mum invited her new husband to my therapy session without asking and said he needed to understand the family dynamic. So I was going through a rough time and decided to start seeing a therapist. I was dealing with some anxiety and some family stuff that I wanted to work through in a healthy way. My therapist was great. She was helping me develop coping strategies and work through some of my trauma and issues. It was a confidential space where I could talk about anything. It was supposed to be my safe space to process things. My mum knew I was going to therapy, but I hadn't told her a lot of details about what I was discussing in my sessions. I considered my therapy to be private. I wasn't telling my family the specific things I was working through. My mum had gotten remarried about a year prior to me starting therapy. I had a complicated relationship with her new husband. He was nice enough, but I didn't feel like I knew him that well. And I definitely had some complicated feelings about my mum remarrying because of my own family history and stuff. One day, my mum called me and told me that she and her new husband wanted to sit in on one of my therapy sessions. She said they wanted to understand what was going on with me and that having her husband there would help him understand the family dynamic. I was immediately uncomfortable with this idea. I told my mum that therapy was supposed to be confidential and that I didn't feel comfortable having them in the session. I told her that was my private space to work through personal stuff. She got upset and said I was being secretive and that families should be open with each other. She said if there was nothing to hide, why couldn't they come to a session? I tried to explain that it wasn't about hiding anything. It was about having a confidential space to process things without worrying about my mum's feelings or how she'd react to what I said. I told her that my therapist had probably told me about the importance of privacy in therapy. My mum insisted. She said she wanted to be part of my healing journey and that her husband wanted to understand me better. She said it was actually a sign that they cared and wanted to be involved. I felt pressured. My mum can be pretty insistent when she wants something, and I didn't want to disappoint her or seem ungrateful. So I agreed to let them come to one session. I told my therapist what was happening, and my therapist was not happy about it. She explained to me that therapy is supposed to be a confidential space, and that having family members present could compromise my ability to be honest. She said, if I felt pressured into this, I should know that I had the right to say no, but I'd already committed to it, so we went ahead. The session was awkward from the start. My mum and her husband came in and sat down. My therapist tried to make it work, but it was immediately clear that having them there changed the dynamic completely. I wasn't able to be honest about some of the things I wanted to talk about, because my mum was sitting right there. I was worried about hurting her feelings. I was worried about her judgment. I was worried about what she'd think of me, or what she'd say to her new husband about what I shared. My therapist tried to facilitate a conversation, but mostly it turned into my mum defending herself about various family issues, and her new husband asking questions about family history. It wasn't about my healing. It wasn't about me at all. It became about them and what they wanted to understand. By the end of the session, I felt more anxious than I did before we went in. I felt like my safe space had been invaded. I felt like my privacy had been violated. After the session, my mum asked me why I seemed upset. I tried to explain that the session wasn't helpful because I couldn't be honest with them there. She said I was being dramatic and that she'd learned some useful things about our family dynamic. She seemed to think the session had been beneficial for her and her husband, which completely missed the point. The point was that it was supposed to be beneficial for me. I talked to my therapist about it afterward, and she validated my feelings. She told me that in the future, I had every right to refuse to let family members into my sessions. She said my privacy was important and that my healing couldn't happen if I didn't feel safe. She encouraged me to set boundaries with my mum about this. But setting boundaries with my mum is really hard. She doesn't respond well to being told no, so I just stopped telling her when I had therapy appointments. I didn't tell her anything about my sessions anymore. I kept my therapy completely separate from my family life. It was sad because it meant I couldn't really talk to my mum about my mental health journey, but at least I had my sessions back to being a safe space. My relationship with my mum is strained because of stuff like this, where she doesn't respect my boundaries. She thinks that being family means she gets access to everything in my life. She doesn't understand that respecting someone means respecting their privacy and their right to have things that are separate from the family. My aunt literally pretended to forget my name because I hadn't visited in a few months. She said, maybe if you came around more, I'd remember. Like my name was something that could just evaporate from her brain because I didn't make a trip out to see her. I'm 24 and I live about 3 hours away from my extended family. I've got my own life going on. I'm working full-time as an accountant. I've got friends, a partner, a whole situation. And honestly, visiting family every other weekend just isn't realistic for me. My aunt and I used to be pretty close when I was younger. She'd babysit me sometimes and we'd have a decent relationship. She was like the fun aunt who'd take me to get ice cream and let me pick out movies to watch at her house. But as I got older and my life got busier with SC, school and then work, I couldn't visit as much as I used to. I still tried to make it out for major holidays and stuff like Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I wasn't making trips out every month or anything. I'd call her sometimes, but my work schedule was demanding and I was trying to build my career. About 6 months ago, my family got together for a holiday dinner at my aunt's house. I made the drive out and spent the whole day there. We had a nice time, caught up, had dinner with all my cousins and their families, the whole thing. I brought wine and a dessert. I helped her set up. I was present and engaged. But at one point, my aunt pulled me aside in the kitchen and said something like, "I can't believe how long it's been since we've seen you. You never visit anymore." I felt like I'd be end-slapped. I'd just driven 3 hours to be there. I tried to explain that I was busy with work and it's a 3-hour drive, but she didn't really want to hear it. She said if I really cared about family, I'd make more of an effort. She said I was being selfish. I felt guilty even though I was trying to be reasonable about it. I'm a young adult with my own responsibilities. I can't spend half my week driving to see family. That's just not realistic. After that visit, I felt obligated to prove something. So I made an effort to visit a little more often. I drove out maybe once every 2 months or so, which honestly felt like a lot given my schedule and gas costs and everything. But apparently, it still wasn't enough. It was like nothing I did would satisfy her. When I went to the next family gathering, my aunt acted weird around me. She was kind of cold. When I said hi to her, she looked at me and said, "Do I know you?" I thought she was joking at first. I laughed and said something like, "Yeah, I'm your nephew." She gave me this look and said, "I'm not sure. I can't quite remember your name. Maybe if you came around more, I'd remember it." I was stunned. This wasn't playful joking. She was genuinely acting like she couldn't remember my name. She was acting confused about who I was. Everyone around us could see how uncomfortable the situation was becoming. Some people looked embarrassed for both of us. Others looked like they wanted to see where this was going. I told her my name, and she acted like it was clicking in slowly, like she was trying to remember a person she'd met once years ago. It was so uncomfortable, and frankly, kind of cruel. I tried not to let it bother me, but it obviously did. At the next family event, she did it again. She made a point of acting confused about my name. She'd look at me and say things like, "You look familiar," and then when I'd remind her of my name, she'd say something about how I needed to visit more if I wanted her to actually remember things about me. I didn't understand what she was trying to accomplish. Was she trying to hurt me? Was she trying to make me feel bad? Because it was definitely working. I talked to my mum about it and she seemed frustrated, but also kind of sympathetic to my aunt's perspective. She said that my aunt felt like family members should make more effort to stay connected, and that this was her weird way of expressing that. My mum said I shouldn't take it personally, but it was hard not to. I was trying to maintain a relationship despite my busy life. I was making the effort, and she was responding by pretending I was a stranger. A few more months went by and this became this weird pattern. Every time I'd see my aunt, she'd act like she couldn't remember my name. It got to the point where other people in the family were calling her out about it. My cousin pulled me aside and said he thought she was being ridiculous and that it wasn't okay to treat me that way. Some other relatives also made comments about how weird it was. but my aunt didn't stop. She seemed to think this was an appropriate punishment for me not visiting frequently enough. She'd make these comments like, "It's so sad when family members become strangers," and she'd look directly at me when she said it, like I was the problem for having a job and a life outside of family obligations. Eventually, I just stopped visiting. I know that sounds like I let her win, and maybe I did, but I got tired of going somewhere and being made to feel unwelcome by someone playing mind games about remembering my name. I'd make a 3-hour drive, sacrifice my free time, spend gas money, clear my schedule, and then arrive to be treated like a stranger. It wasn't worth the emotional toll. It wasn't worth driving home feeling hurt and humiliated. Now when my family gets together for holidays, my aunt sometimes asks my mum why I never come anymore. When people tell her it's because, of how she treated me, she acts genuinely surprised. She says she was just joking around and being playful. She says I'm being too sensitive and holding a grudge over nothing. She acts like I'm the unreasonable one. But it wasn't nothing to me. It was hurtful and deliberately mean. She was using her supposed forgetfulness as a weapon to punish me for not visiting frequently enough. It's a form of emotional manipulation disguised as a family joke. I haven't seen her in about a year now, and I don't really have any desire to change that despite family pressure to reconcile. My aunt decided that testing my commitment to family was more important than actually being a welcoming presence. So I'm not going to force myself to visit someone who makes me feel bad about myself and treats me like an outsider. My cousin announced her pregnancy at my baby shower. So I was pregnant with my first child, and my mum threw me this really nice baby shower. We'd been planning it for a few weeks, sent out invites, picked a butterfly theme because I loved butterflies, registered for gifts at like 3 different stores, the whole thing. My cousin was invited because we'd always been pretty close. We grew up together, and she's just a few years older than me. I was genuinely excited to have her there, and to have her support during this big life change. The party was great. People were showing up with gifts and flowers. We were playing baby-themed games and laughing, opening gifts, eating snacks and cake. I was getting all these wonderful gifts and genuine congratulations from people in my life who cared about me. It felt amazing to be celebrated during this really important moment. I felt so loved and supported. Then my cousin pulled me aside about halfway through the party. She had this excited look on her face. She told me she had an announcement to make and asked if I'd mind if she shared it with the group. I assumed she was going to say something nice about me or about being excited to be an aunt. I said, sure, go ahead. My cousin called everyone together and announced that she was pregnant too. She was so excited about it. She made this whole announcement in front of everyone at my baby shower. People were congratulating her while I was standing right there. My baby shower somehow became about celebrating her pregnancy instead of celebrating mine. That was already kind of frustrating, but here's where it gets even worse. After she made her announcement, she brought out this elaborate cake that she'd apparently had made. It was decorated with her pregnancy announcement on it. She brought her own cake to my baby shower. She cut into it and started serving it to people instead of eating the cake my mum had brought for my party. She was literally replacing my baby shower cake with her own pregnancy announcement cake. I was standing there in shock watching this happen. People were asking her questions about when she was due, how far along she was, all of this. My baby shower turned into her pregnancy celebration. I felt so hurt and angry. This was supposed to be my day. My mum spent time and money planning this party for me. We invited people to celebrate my pregnancy, and my Usain hijacked it to celebrate her own. When I tried to talk to her about it afterward in the car ride home, she seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset. She kept saying things like, "I wasn't trying to steal your thunder or anything." She said she was just so excited about her pregnancy that she couldn't wait to tell people. She said she thought it would be nice to celebrate both of us at the same event. She said that was more efficient and that we were close, so why couldn't we share the moment? I tried to explain to her that a baby shower is specifically about celebrating the person having the baby. It's not a general celebration event where you can insert your own news. It's my event. my party, my day to feel special. She got defensive and said I was being selfish, and that she thought I'd be happy for her. And I was happy for her, I really was. But that didn't mean she got to announce her pregnancy at my baby shower. It's called boundaries, basic respect. My cousin had already had her own experiences with major life events and accomplishments. She would have her own baby shower eventually. She'd get to be celebrated too. This one was for me. She could have waited literally any amount of time to make her announcement. She could have told me privately, the day before or the day after. She could have told our family in a different context, at a different time. She specifically chose to do it at my event. I think she was subconsciously competing with me. Our families have always been a little competitive about who does things first or whose kids are going to be the smartest or whatever. I think maybe her timing wasn't actually an accident. I think she saw me getting all this attention and celebration and she didn't want to be left out. So she inserted her own news into my moment. The rest of my baby shower was kind of awkward and divided. Some people were asking me questions about my pregnancy and some people were asking her questions about hers. The focus was split. It wasn't the unified celebration of my upcoming motherhood that it should have been. My mum was also frustrated. She'd put all this work into throwing me a party, and my cousin had essentially taken over half of it. A few years later, after we'd both given birth to our children, I asked my cousin about it again. I said I never really got a satisfying explanation for why she thought it was okay to do that at my baby shower. She apologised and said she'd been immature and selfish at that time in her life. She said she wasn't thinking clearly about how her actions would affect me. She admitted that she probably should have waited or told me privately before making the big announcement. So at least she eventually understood that what she did was wrong. But I still remember how hurt I felt in that specific moment. Baby showers are supposed to be special occasions. They're supposed to make the pregnant person feel celebrated and supported. Mine became divided and awkward because my cousin couldn't let me have my own moment without inserting herself into it. My brother brought his girlfriend to my dad's funeral and she spent the entire service taking selfies. My dad passed away suddenly. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. He'd been healthy, no warning signs, and then he was just gone. One day he was complaining about work and the next day he had a heart attack at his desk. I was devastated. My whole family was devastated. We organised a funeral service for him. It was held at a church he used to go to sometimes. It was really important for all of us to be there and to support each other during this incredibly difficult time. My brother and I aren't super close. We had this typical sibling dynamic growing up, but we're family and we were both grieving the loss of our father. A few months prior to the funeral, he'd gotten a new girlfriend. She seemed nice enough when I'd met her once or twice at family stuff, but I didn't know her very well. They'd only been dating like 3 months. I assumed she wouldn't come to the funeral since she hadn't known my dad and hadn't been in the family long. I figured my brother would come alone, or with my mum, but he showed up to the funeral service with his girlfriend on his arm. That was kind of unusual, but I wasn't going to judge. Maybe he needed support to get through it. Maybe he wanted her to meet the family, even though the timing seemed really weird given that we were literally burying our father. But then during the service, she started taking selfies. I first noticed it during my uncle's eulogy, when my dad's best friend was talking about their shared memories, and she was literally posing for the camera, making sad faces and taking pictures of herself. During the prayers, she was angling for the perfect lighting to take photos. She was turning around to get shots of the casket behind her. She was taking multiple pictures with my brother in them, his arm around her like it was some kind of couple's photo shoot where they were modelling grief together. I was absolutely shocked and appalled by this behaviour. My mum noticed it too, and I could see her expression go from sad to furious. Other family members noticed and started whispering to each other. People were literally looking at this girl like she'd lost her mind. The most disrespectful part was that she was doing this during moments of silence, during the prayers, during tributes to my dad's life and his character. She was inserting herself and her desire for social media content into the most sacred moments of our goodbye to someone we loved. After the service, my mum pulled my brother aside and asked him to talk to his girlfriend about her behaviour. My brother seemed embarrassed about it. He told my mum that his girlfriend was just trying to document the event and that she didn't mean any disrespect. She was just making memories. Making memories? It's a funeral. It's not a photo op. It's not content for Instagram. It's a place where we're saying goodbye to a person we love. My brother eventually talked to his girlfriend, and she did apologise, but the apology felt hollow. She didn't understand why it was inappropriate. She kept saying that she was just being supportive by being there, and that she wanted to remember the day. You remember a funeral by reflecting on your relationship with the deceased and supporting your grieving family members. You don't remember it by taking selfies in front of their casket. The funeral was over a year ago now. I still think about how inappropriate that was. I think about how disrespectful it felt to my dad's memory. I think about how my brother prioritised his girlfriend's social media presence over the dignity and respect of his father's funeral service. He could have left her at home. He could have asked her not to take pictures. He could have put his phone in his pocket. There were so many ways this could have been handled differently. But instead, we got a girlfriend using my dad's death as an opportunity to curate her image online. My mum took my birthday money and used it to pay bills. She said it technically benefited everyone. I turned 16 and my parents gave me some birthday money as a gift. It was $300 total. Not a huge amount, but for a 16-year-old, it felt like a lot. I'd been planning what I was going to do with it for weeks. I wanted to save it for a car eventually, or maybe use it for clothes and going out with friends. I kept the money in my room in a small box under my bed. My mum knew I had the money. I told her about it on my birthday. I wasn't trying to hide it from anyone. About a week after my birthday, I went to get my money to count it and figure out a solid savings plan. I opened up my box and it was gone. The box was empty. I looked everywhere. I checked my room multiple times, looked under my bed, checked my dresser drawers, looked in my closet. I asked my siblings if they'd borrowed it or seen it. Nothing. I had no idea where my money had gone. I was starting to panic. I went to my mum and asked her where my birthday money was. Was it possible I'd misremembered where I put it? She got really quiet and wouldn't make eye contact. Then she admitted that she'd taken it. She said that she and my dad were having some financial trouble and that bills were due. She needed money to pay for electricity and car insurance and groceries. She said that my birthday money could help cover some of those expenses, just enough to get them through the month. She said that even though the money was technically mine, it technically benefited everyone in the family because we all lived in the same house. We all needed the electricity to be on. We all benefited from having food in the house. We all benefited from having reliable cars. So in her mind, using my birthday money to pay household bills was actually a form of family contribution on my part. I was absolutely furious. That was my money. My grandparents and aunts and friends gave me that money as a gift for my birthday, specifically. It wasn't meant to pay your bills or household expenses. That's an adult responsibility. I told my mum that she shouldn't have taken my money without asking permission first. She got really defensive and said I was being ungrateful and selfish. She said that if I truly loved my family, I'd want to help out. She said that other kids would be happy to contribute to the family's well-being instead of hoarding their birthday money. I pointed out that there's a clear difference between willingly and generously helping out and having your birthday money stolen to pay bills without consent. Those aren't the same thing at all. My mum didn't see it that way. She said I was young and didn't understand how hard it was to be an adult and manage a household. She said I'd understand when I was older. But I didn't feel like I needed to understand. I felt like I'd been wronged. My dad seemed more sympathetic. He apologised for my mum taking the money. He said she shouldn't have done it without talking to me first. But he also said that their financial situation was stressful and that sometimes families had to make difficult decisions. He didn't outright apologise for the money being used. He just apologised that it had happened without my permission. That felt like a non-apology. Over the years, this happened a couple more times. I'd get money as a gift for my birthday or Christmas, and my mum would eventually take it for bills or other family expenses. She always had the same justification every single time. It benefits the whole family. I'm struggling. You're a kid. You don't need money anyway. Your turn to contribute. Eventually, I stopped telling her when I had money. I kept it completely hidden. I opened a separate bank account that she didn't know about and started putting money in there whenever I could earn it. I didn't trust her, and honestly, I still don't even now. I'm still guarded about money. Now that I'm an adult with my own place and my own financial responsibilities, I can see how inappropriate that was. Kids deserve to have things that are their own. Birthday money is a gift meant for the birthday person. It's not a family emergency fund. It's not a communal pot. My mum's financial stress doesn't mean she gets to take money from her children without permission. That's not parenting. That's theft. I'm not close with my mum anymore, partially because of stuff like this where she didn't respect my boundaries or my property or my right to have things that were just mine. My grandma announced to everyone that I dropped out of college. She told them I changed my major. I was in college when I decided to change my major. I'd started as a pre-med student because that's what my family expected. My parents had been pushing me toward medicine since I was a kid. They talk about me becoming a doctor like it was inevitable, like I didn't have any say in my own future. But after my first year of taking organic chemistry and biology and all these demanding courses, I realised it wasn't what I wanted to do. I was absolutely miserable. The coursework wasn't interesting to me, even though I was doing well in it. The career path didn't appeal to me. I didn't want to spend my life in a hospital or dealing with medical emergencies. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to study something I was actually passionate about. So I sat down with my parents and told them I wanted to change my major to English. I told them I wanted to study literature and writing. My parents were shocked and then deeply disappointed. They thought I was throwing away a good career opportunity. They thought I was being impulsive. They asked if I was sure about this decision. But eventually, they accepted it because what else were they going to do? It was my life and my education after all. I changed my major and I was so much happier almost immediately. I enjoyed my classes. I was getting good grades. I was actually excited about school again and didn't dread waking up to go to class. The problem was when my grandma found out about it. I think my parents told her about my major change, or maybe another family member mentioned it. But she found out that I'd changed my major away from pre-med, and she did not take it well at all. She seemed personally offended. The next time there was a family gathering, my grandma announced to a group of people that I'd dropped out of college entirely. She didn't say I changed my major. She said I dropped out. She said I was wasting my potential. She said I was being irresponsible and immature. She said I'd thrown away my future because I was too lazy to stick with my pre-med studies. She said she was disappointed and my parents had failed to raise me properly. But I hadn't dropped out of college. I was still very much in college. I'd just changed my major. I was still taking classes every semester. I was still in school making progress toward a degree. I corrected her in the moment. I said I changed my major, but I was still in college and still doing well. My grandma rolled her eyes and said that changing my major to English was basically the same as dropping out. She said there was absolutely no future in studying English literature. She said I'd never get a job. She said I was ruining my life and my future prospects. She said all this loudly in front of a bunch of family members and family friends. I was so embarrassed and humiliated. I tried to explain to her that changing your major is a completely normal and common part of the college experience. Lots of students do it. It doesn't mean I'm failing out or giving up. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means I discovered something I am more passionate about and changed direction. But my grandma didn't want to hear it. She kept insisting that I'd dropped out and that I was making a huge mistake that I'd regret. For the next year or so, whenever there was a family gathering, my grandma would bring it up. She'd mention it to people she was talking to. She'd say things like, "Oh, that's his thing. He's the one who dropped out of college." She told people I was depressed. She told people I was going through a phase. She told people I'd regret my decision. She was spreading this narrative that I'd failed at something when I hadn't actually failed at anything. I'd just made a different choice. Eventually, I graduated from college with a degree in English. I didn't tell my grandma about my graduation. I didn't invite her. I didn't want her to have any part of something I was actually proud of, given how she treated my major change. When I got my degree and started looking for jobs, my grandma asked why I hadn't invited her to my graduation ceremony. I asked her why I would possibly invite her when she spent years telling people I'd dropped out of college and ruined my life. She acted shocked and offended by the question. She said she was just worried about me. She said she wanted me to succeed, but her way of showing that was by lying about my educational status to other people and being completely unsupportive of my choices. That's not what support looks like. That's what sabotage looks like. That's what happens when someone prioritizes their own opinions over supporting the people they love. My sister straight up lied to all her friends about owning my house. I'm 29 years old, and about 5 years ago, I bought a house. It was a big deal for me. I worked really hard to save up the down payment, got approved for a mortgage, found a place I loved in a decent neighborhood, and closed on it. I was so proud of myself. It was mine. My name on the deed, my investment, my property. My sister is 2 years younger than me, and she's always been the type to exaggerate things about her life to make herself sound better or more impressive than she actually is. Nothing huge, just like she'd tell people she was managing a department at her job when she was actually just a supervisor. She'd say she travelled internationally for work when she took one business trip to Mexico. That kind of thing. But the house thing was different because it directly involved me and my property. I found out what she'd been doing when one of my co-workers casually mentioned something about visiting my sister's beautiful house. I was confused. My sister doesn't own a house. She rents an apartment. My co-worker looked at me weird and said that wasn't what she'd been told. My co-worker said my sister had shown her photos of this gorgeous house and talked about how she was fixing it up and what her vision was for different rooms. My sister had apparently spent like an hour showing her pictures and talking about her renovation plans. I knew something was off. I asked my co-worker to describe the house and she started describing my house, down to the specific colour of the shutters and the layout of the backyard. My sister had been showing people pictures of my house and claiming it was hers. I was furious. I confronted my sister about it. I asked her directly if she'd been telling people that my house was hers. She got really defensive at first and tried to deny it. She said I must be misunderstanding something. But I pressed her, and eventually she admitted that yeah, she'd shown some friends pictures of my house and talked about it like it was hers. When I asked her why, she said she was just being friendly and making conversation. She said she thought it was weird that I was getting so upset about it. She said it wasn't like she was trying to sell the house or anything. She was just talking about it. But that's not the point. She was lying. She was claiming ownership of something that doesn't belong to her. She was presenting my accomplishment as her own accomplishment. She was being dishonest about her living situation. When I tried to explain to her how inappropriate that was, she got even more defensive. She said I was being possessive and that family should share things. She said just because my name was on the deed didn't mean I had to be weird about not letting her claim it as hers. I tried to explain that there's a huge difference between saying something like, my sister's house is so beautiful, and literally telling people that the house is hers. One is being supportive of family. The other is lying. But my sister didn't see it that way. She thought I was overreacting. She also started telling people that I was renting the house to her. Not that I owned it and she just lived there sometimes, but that I was actually the landlord renting the property to her. She was trying to justify her claims of ownership by reframing our relationship to the house. I'm not renting my house to my sister. She lives in an apartment. She doesn't live in my house at all. She just sometimes visits and we'd shown each other the place because it's my home and I was excited about it. but in how she's going around telling her friends that she's renting it from me. So in her version of events, the house belongs to her because she lives there on a rental basis, which is completely false. When I found out she was doing this, I was even more upset. I told her she needed to stop telling people this immediately. I told her to clarify with her friends that the house is actually mine, not hers, and that she doesn't rent it. She refused. She said she didn't want to look stupid in front of her friends by correcting them. She said it was easier to just let them think what they thought. I was like, it doesn't matter if it's easier for you. What matters is that you're being dishonest. You're lying about owning my house and lying about renting it from me. That's not okay. But my sister don't budge. She said I was making a bigger deal out of this than it needed to be. She said her friends didn't care where she actually lived and that it didn't affect me. So why did I care so much? I cared because it was a lie about my property. I cared because she was taking credit for my accomplishment. I cared because she was being dishonest. Eventually, I just stopped engaging with her about it. I couldn't convince her that what she was doing was wrong, but I did start correcting people when they brought it up. When someone would mention her beautiful house, I'd say, "Oh, that's actually my house. She lives in an apartment and sometimes visits." It was awkward, but it felt necessary. My sister got annoyed that I was correcting people, which is hilarious because she started the lie in the first place. But somehow in her mind, me correcting her lies was me being the unreasonable one. We're not super close anymore, partially because of stuff like this. There's a fundamental lack of honesty and respect in our relationship. She doesn't respect that things that are mine are actually mine. She doesn't respect my right to control the narrative about my own accomplishments. She just takes what she wants and tells herself stories that justify it. That's the kind of relationship dynamic that eventually just wears you down. Wow, so she literally presented your house as her own and then doubled down when caught by framing it as her renting to her. The mental gymnastics to avoid admitting she was wrong are impressive, and the fact that she got upset with you for correcting her lies shows zero accountability. She wanted the credit for owning a house without doing any of the work. Speaking of people who'll do anything to look good in front of others, let me tell you about my uncle, who decided that my grandfather's watch would be a great item to pawn for cash. My grandfather passed away about 3 years ago. He was an amazing man, really kind. Lots of people in the family had great relationships with him. Before he died, he left specific items to specific people in his will. I got his watch. It's this beautiful vintage watch that he'd owned for like 40 years. It has his initials engraved on the back. It's not super expensive or anything, but it has sentimental value. It's a family piece. It's something that belonged to someone I loved, and it's one of the few tangible things I have that connects me to him. I keep it in a safe place. I don't wear it often because I'm worried about damaging it, but I look at it sometimes and think about him. My uncle is my grandfather's son. He should understand the value of these family items, but apparently he doesn't. About 6 months after my grandfather's funeral, my uncle called me out of the blue. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. I asked what it was and he said he needed to borrow the watch. I said no. He pushed and said he really needed it. Something about money problems and needing to pawn it temporarily. He said he'd buy it back eventually. I was shocked. This wasn't his watch. It wasn't his to ask for. My grandfather specifically left it to me in his will. It has his initials on it. It's not like it was just some generic valuable item. My uncle seemed to think I should be willing to hand over my inheritance so he could get quick cash. I told him absolutely not. I said the watch was a gift from my grandfather and it was not for sale. My uncle got really angry. He said I was being selfish and that family should help each other. He said my grandfather would have wanted to see him get out of his financial trouble. He tried to guilt me into giving him the watch. He said my grandfather loved him and wouldn't want him suffering. But that's not how inheritance works. That's not how family works. Just because I have something doesn't mean it's my responsibility to give it away because someone else wants money. I tried to explain this, but my uncle was not hearing it. He kept pushing. He even went to my mum to try to get her to convince me to give him the watch. My mum told him no, that it was my inheritance and my choice. But that didn't stop my uncle. He showed up at my house a few weeks later, unannounced. He was asking again if he could borrow the watch, being way too friendly about it, clearly trying a different tactic. He was acting like we were on good terms, and that this was just a casual thing he was asking. I told him to leave. I said I wasn't comfortable with him coming to my house and asking for my things. He seemed shocked that I was being so firm about it. He left, but the whole interaction made me really uncomfortable. I felt like he'd crossed a boundary by showing up at my place when I'd already told him no multiple times. About a month after that visit, my cousin called me. She said my uncle had been at a pawn shop trying to pawn a watch. The pawn shop had called her because my uncle had listed her as a reference or something. I don't totally remember the details. But anyway, the pawn shop described the watch, and my cousin realised it sounded like my grandfather's watch, the one that was supposed to be mine. The pawn shop didn't complete the transaction because my uncle couldn't provide proof that the watch was actually his to pawn. He didn't have any documentation. He just showed up with it and tried to sell it. The pawn shop wanted verification. My uncle apparently panicked and left before they could do the full paperwork, so he didn't successfully pawn it, but he clearly tried. That means he had to have taken the watch from somewhere. He didn't have it legitimately. I realised he must have stolen it. I don't know when or how he got access to it, but my watch was gone. I immediately checked my safe, and it wasn't there. I searched everywhere and couldn't find it. My uncle had stolen my watch, my inheritance from my grandfather, and tried to pawn it for cash. I was devastated and angry. I called my uncle and asked him where my watch was. He denied taking it at first. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. But I told him I knew he'd tried to pawn a watch at the shop, and my cousin had told me about it. He finally admitted that he'd taken the watch. He said it was in my house the last time he visited, and he just grabbed it. He said he was desperate for money and thought he could sell it and buy it back later. He said he was sorry it didn't work out. He was sorry it didn't work out? He stole my inheritance and apologised that the pawn shop didn't take it. That's not an apology. That's not taking responsibility. I told him I needed him to return the watch immediately, or I'd call the police. He said he didn't have it anymore. He'd left it at the pawn shop when things fell through, and he never went back to get it. So my watch is at a pawn shop somewhere, and my uncle doesn't even know which one, or where it ended up. I reached out to several pawn shops in the area, but none of them had any record of a watch matching my grandfather's description. My watch is just gone. I lost a piece of my inheritance, a connection to my grandfather, because my uncle decided my property was fair game for his financial problems. My family tried to brush it under the rug. They said these things happen and I should just move on. But I can't just move on. He stole from me. He violated my trust and my privacy by coming into my house and taking something that wasn't his. The relationship I have with my uncle is basically non-existent now. I won't forgive him for this. That's absolutely insane. He didn't just ask for help or borrow money. He literally stole your inheritance and then tried to convert it to cash at a pawn shop. And when caught, his excuse was that he wanted to buy it back later. He gambled with your grandfather's watch and lost. The entitlement is unreal. He violated your trust, invaded your home, and destroyed something irreplaceable, all because he had money problems. Now let me tell you about my dad's girlfriend, who seems to think my name is the same as the family dog. I'm 22, and my dad remarried about 2 years ago. His new wife, I'll call her Christine, moved into our house with her things and a lot of opinions about how everything should be run. She seems nice enough when you first meet her, but there's something off about the way she interacts with me specifically. She's perfectly friendly to my dad and my younger brother, but with me there's this weird distance. She seems kind of cold, actually. I thought maybe it was just an adjustment period. You know, blending families and all that. But it's been 2 years and things have not improved. The strangest part is that Christine constantly calls me by the wrong name. My name is Riley. Our family dog is named Rosie. Christine literally calls me Rosie half the time. She'll say things like, "Oh Rosie, can you pass the salt?" Or she'll call out, "Rosie, did you want to come watch this movie with us?" And I'm like, "My name is Riley, not Rosie. I'm a person. The dog is the dog." There's a clear distinction here. The first time she did it, I assumed it was an honest mistake. People mix up names sometimes, but it kept happening. She'd call me Rosie and then immediately call the actual dog Rosie. So she knew the dog's name. She just seemed to be randomly substituting my name with the dog's name in her head. I corrected her gently a few times. I said, "Actually, my name is Riley," and she'd laugh it off like it was cute or funny. She'd say things like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scatterbrained," and move on. But she never actually stopped doing it. She just kept calling me Rosie. My dad didn't say anything about it. My brother didn't say anything. It was like everyone else thought this was a normal thing for her to do. I asked my dad about it privately. I said, Why does Christine keep calling me by the dog's name?" He said he hadn't really noticed. He said Christine probably just misspoke sometimes and that I shouldn't take it personally. But I felt like I was taking it very personally. She was literally calling me by the wrong name, the dog's name, repeatedly. And no one else seemed to think it was weird. I felt like she was either doing it intentionally to be mean, or she genuinely didn't respect me enough to learn my actual name. Either way, it was hurtful. I started keeping track of how many times she did it. In 1 week, she called me Rosie 5 times. 5 times. And every time I corrected her or looked confused, she'd laugh it off like I was being oversensitive. It was humiliating, honestly. She'd do it in front of my friends too sometimes, and they'd look confused, and I'd have to explain that no, my name is actually Riley, she just calls me by the dog's name for some reason. My friends would be really uncomfortable during those moments, and I could see them feeling awkward for me. I finally reached out to my dad again and said this was really bothering me. I said it felt like Christine didn't respect me or wasn't making an effort to remember my name. He seemed frustrated that I was bringing it up again. He said I was being too sensitive and that Christine just had a quirky sense of humour. He said this was what blended families looked like, and I need Ed to be more flexible. Flexible about being called by the dog's name? I didn't think that was asking too much, to be called by my actual name by someone living in my house. But apparently, I was wrong according to my dad. I let it go after that because I didn't want to create more conflict in the house. My dad seemed annoyed that I'd brought it up multiple times. I didn't want to be seen as the difficult stepchild who was causing problems in their new marriage. So I just accepted that Christine was going to call me by the dog's name, and I wasn't going to say anything about it anymore. It still bothers me when she does it though. Every single time she says Rosie and I look up, thinking she's talking to the dog, only to realise she means me. It's mortifying, and it's made me feel less than welcome in what's supposed to be my home. I'm an adult and I deserve to be treated with basic respect, which includes being called by my actual name. Christine has never apologised or acknowledged that this is hurtful. She just keeps doing it like it's a funny quirk that everyone should find endearing. And the rest of my family has decided that me being upset about it is me being unreasonable and overly sensitive. I don't know if she's doing it to be deliberately passive-aggressive or if she genuinely can't remember my name after 2 years. But either way, it's deeply disrespectful. It's a small thing, maybe, but small disrespects add up over time. They're death by 1,000 cuts, and I'm tired of cutting. Your cousin saw your cute hashtag and decided it was hers now, without even asking, and then called you uptight when you pointed out that she was basically stamping all over a memory you'd curated. Hashtags might be public, but there's something uniquely rude about just commandeering someone else's event hashtag. She had infinite options and chose the one that was already taken. My brother brought his girlfriend to my dad's funeral and she spent the entire service taking selfies. I'm 26 years old and my dad passed away suddenly about 8 months ago. It was completely unexpected. One day he was fine, the next day he had a massive heart attack at work and he was gone. The whole thing was a shock to everyone. My family was devastated, obviously. My dad was a good man, a great father, and losing him so suddenly left this huge hole in our lives. We had the funeral 2 weeks after he died because it took time to plan everything and for family to travel. My brother, who's 23, told us he wanted to bring his new girlfriend. They'd only been dating for like 4 months, so it was a little soon for her to be at a major family event like this. But I understood that he wanted support during a difficult time. We said okay. My mum didn't really care either way. She was just trying to get through the day. The funeral was held at our family's church. It was a beautiful service. People came from all over. Friends from Dad's work family, people from the community. There was a reception afterward, but the service itself was held in the church with a closed casket. My brother brought his girlfriend, let's call her Megan, and she seemed quiet and respectful when they arrived. I thought, okay, this is going to be fine. Megan will sit with my brother. They'll pay their respects and everything will be normal. I was so wrong. About 15 minutes into the service, while the pastor was giving his eulogy about my dad and his life, Megan pulled out her phone. Not to silence it, to take a selfie. I was sitting a few pews back and I could see her angling her phone at herself, getting her face in the frame with the casket in the background and snapping a photo. I could not believe what I was seeing at my father's funeral, while the pastor was speaking about my father's legacy. This girl was taking selfies. I'm not talking about a quick photo to commemorate the day or anything. She took multiple photos. She was trying different angles. She was checking the photos on her phone to make sure they looked good. I watched her in disbelief. My mum was at the front sitting with my brother. I'm not sure if she could see what Megan was doing from that angle, but I could see it clearly. I watched this girl take at least 5 selfies during the actual funeral service. Then after the service ended and everyone was standing around, greeting each other and sharing memories of my dad, Megan was still doing it. She was taking photos with other people in the background, posing, smiling, trying to get the perfect shot. The whole tone of the funeral was somber and respectful, but Megan seemed to think she was at a social event where she needed to document herself. I was so angry. I couldn't believe my brother wasn't stopping this. Didn't he realize how disrespectful this was? Didn't he see what his girlfriend was doing? I asked him about it later, after the funeral, after everyone had gone home. I asked him if he knew that Megan had been taking selfies throughout the entire service. He seemed confused. He said, yeah, she'd mentioned taking some photos to remember the day. I said there's a big difference between taking a respectful photo to remember something and taking multiple selfies during the pastor's eulogy. I said his girlfriend had spent most of the service taking pictures of herself instead of paying respect to our father. My brother got defensive. He said Megan was just trying to be part of the experience and that she meant no harm. He said I was being judgmental and that Megan was sensitive about being at family events because she felt like she didn't belong, so she was taking selfies to feel more comfortable. That's what his excuse was. I pointed out that someone's funeral is not the place to work through your social anxiety by taking photos of yourself. That's incredibly disrespectful to the family and to the person who died. My brother didn't want to hear it. He said I was overreacting and that Megan had been nothing but kind. He said she was upset about my dad dying and wanted to be there to support him. If she was so upset, why was she smiling for selfies? If she was there to support him, why was she so focused on getting good photos of herself? The whole thing made me feel sick. My dad had just died, and instead of a respectful, meaningful funeral, I had to watch my brother's girlfriend treat the service like it was content for her social media. I later found out that she had posted one of the selfies on Instagram with the caption, "Supporting my boyfriend during a difficult time." The selfie showed her smiling with the church in the background and part of the funeral setup visible. People were commenting on how pretty she looked, and she was responding to comments during the funeral reception. This wasn't about supporting my brother. This was about her getting attention. Several family members pulled me aside after the funeral and asked if I'd seen what she was doing. My uncle said he was disgusted by her behaviour and couldn't believe my brother hadn't put a stop to it. My aunt told me she'd seen Megan taking at least 10 selfies by the end of the reception. Everyone noticed, everyone was bothered by it. But my brother just acted like it was no big deal. Like his girlfriend's need for social media content was more important than showing respect for our father. I've tried to move past this, but every time I think about my dad's funeral, The first thing that comes to mind is Megan taking selfies instead of showing respect. My brother is still dating her, and she's been to several family events since then, but I've never been able to look at her the same way. She showed her true character at one of the most difficult times in our family's life, and I won't forget that. That's absolutely disrespectful. Taking selfies during a funeral, especially while the pastor was literally speaking about your dad's life, and then posting it online after with a caption about supporting your boyfriend. The fact that she was smiling and fishing for compliments while your family was grieving is just grotesque. Your brother defending her shows he either didn't understand how inappropriate she was being, or he didn't want to admit his girlfriend was that tone deaf. The fact that multiple family members noticed and were equally disgusted makes it even worse. She didn't just have a lapse in judgment, she was actively focused on getting the perfect shot the entire time. My mum used my birthday money to pay bills and then acted like she did me a favour. I'm 22 years old, and when I turned 21, my parents gave me some money for my birthday. Not a tiny amount either. They gave me $500. It was really generous, honestly. I was working a part-time job at the time, and I was saving up to move out eventually. So I put that birthday money into my savings account, thinking I'd let it sit there and build up over time. I wasn't planning to spend it immediately. The plan was to use it as a cushion for when I eventually moved into my own place. A few weeks after my birthday, my mum asked me about the birthday money. She wanted to know if I was going to use it or if it was just sitting in my account. I told her I was saving it for when I moved out. She seemed to accept that. But then, about 6 weeks after my birthday, I checked my bank account and the $500 was gone. I was shocked. I called my mum immediately and asked her what happened to my money. She admitted that she'd taken it. She said she needed it to cover some bills that had come up unexpectedly. She said the car insurance was more expensive than they'd planned, and some other household expenses had popped up, and she didn't have enough to cover everything. She'd taken my birthday money without asking me first. Just went into my account and transferred it out. I was furious. I told her that was theft. She was my parent, yes, but she couldn't just take my money without permission. That was money I'd been given as a gift for my birthday. It was supposed to be mine. My mum got defensive. She said she was the parent and she had every right to use any money in the house however she needed to. She said she was providing me with a home and food and everything else. So technically, everything in the house belonged to her anyway. She said I was being ungrateful and selfish for getting angry when my family needed help. She framed it like she'd done me a favour by even telling me she'd taken it, instead of just letting me discover it and wonder where it went. She said other kids would be happy to help their families in times of financial stress. Other kids wouldn't be so self-centred. I tried to explain that the issue wasn't me not wanting to help. The issue was that she'd taken money that was specifically given to me as a gift without asking my permission first. If she'd asked me, I might have let her borrow it, or maybe not since I was saving for something important. But she didn't ask. She just took it. My mum wouldn't hear it. She acted like I was being unreasonable and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. She said the money was needed for the family and that my personal savings account wasn't more important than keeping the lights on. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she violated my trust and my property. After that incident, I've been really careful about my finances. I don't keep money in accounts that my parents have access to. I've opened accounts they don't know about. I keep cash hidden. It's sad that I have to do that with my own parents, but I can't trust them with my money. My siblings have even joked about it, asking if I'm hiding money from mum, like she's some kind of criminal. But they don't understand, because it never happened to them. She never stole from them. This is something that happened to me specifically, and it fundamentally changed how I see her. Every time I see my mum now, there's this underlying resentment about what she did. She acted like she was justified in taking my birthday money because family was supposed to come first. But there's a difference between helping your family and having your money stolen from you by your parent without consent. She still doesn't seem to understand why I'm upset about it. She's mentioned a few times that I'm being cold toward her and that I need to get over what happened. She even asked if I wanted to go shopping with her last month and seemed hurt when I said no. But I don't think I will get over it. Not until she apologizes and acknowledges that what she did was wrong. And based on how she's acted so far, I don't think that apology is coming anytime soon. That's terrible. She didn't ask, didn't discuss it with you, just helped herself to your money and then made you feel bad for being upset about it. And framing it like you were selfish for having money when the family needed help is classic guilt tripping. The fact that you now have to hide your finances from your own parent, keep secret bank accounts, and stash cash shows the level of breach of trust she created with that one action. That's not normal family dynamics. That's financial violation. And the fact that she never acknowledged it as wrong is even worse. My grandma told everyone I dropped out of college because I changed my major. I'm 20 years old and I'm currently enrolled at a state university. I declared a business major when I first started, but after my first year, I realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do. I was doing okay in my classes, but I wasn't passionate about it. I didn't want to spend 4 years studying something that didn't excite me and then end up in a career I didn't love. So I switched my major to communications. I thought that was a perfectly normal thing to do in college. Lots of people change their major. I wasn't dropping out. I wasn't failing out. I was still enrolled. I was still taking classes. I was just changing the direction of my degree. My parents were supportive about it. My dad said it made sense to find something I was actually interested in. My mum said whatever made me happy. But my grandma had a different reaction. My mum told me that my grandma had called her after hearing about my major change. My grandma was upset. She said that changing your major was basically the same as dropping out. She said if I wasn't willing to stick with the original plan, then I clearly wasn't cut out for college. She went on a whole thing about commitment and following through and not being a quitter. My mum tried to explain that changing majors was totally normal and that I was still enrolled and still progressing toward a degree. But my grandma wasn't having it. She decided in her mind that I had basically dropped out of college. And then she started telling people that. I found out when my uncle called me and said he'd heard I was having trouble in school. I asked what he meant, and he said my grandma had told him I'd dropped out of college. He sounded concerned, like he thought something was wrong with me academically, or that I was struggling. I had to explain to him that no, I didn't drop out. I just changed my major. He seemed relieved but also confused about why my grandma would tell him that I'd dropped out if that wasn't what happened. Over the next few weeks, I realised my grandma had been telling a lot of people that I'd dropped out. Different family members would bring it up or ask how I was doing after I'd left school. I had to keep explaining that I hadn't left school. I'd just changed my major. It was embarrassing and frustrating. People were getting the impression that I was a failure or that something had gone wrong with my education, when really I was just making a normal adjustment to my degree path. I called my grandma and asked her why she was telling people I dropped out when that wasn't true. She said she'd been trying to understand why I'd changed my major, and the only explanation she could come up with was that I wasn't capable of finishing college. So she'd decided that changing majors was equivalent to dropping out, and was telling people that version of events. She literally said she was trying to protect me by telling people I'd dropped out instead of letting them think I was just indecisive. As if dropping out is somehow better than changing majors. I tried to explain to her that I hadn't dropped out, that changing majors was totally normal, and that she was spreading false information about my academic status. She got defensive and said she was an older person and she didn't understand how college worked these days, and that back when she went to college, you picked your major and you stuck with it. She said young people today were too flaky and always changing their minds. So her solution was to just tell people I dropped out? That doesn't even make sense. I got frustrated and told her to please stop telling people that I dropped out because it's not true. She agreed to stop, but then I found out she kept doing it anyway. She told a family friend that I'd dropped out. She mentioned it to my other uncle. She brought it up at a family dinner when I was literally sitting right there. No matter how many times I told her to stop, she kept spreading this false narrative about my academic situation. Eventually, my parents had to have a serious conversation with her about it, and she finally seemed to understand that she was hurting me with her false statements. But even after that conversation, I could tell she didn't really believe changing majors was a legitimate choice. She still seemed to think I was confused about my path in life. At some point, I just stopped correcting people. It was exhausting to keep having to defend myself and my education choices to the entire family because my grandma had started a rumour about me. My grandma, who's in her 70s, decided that my choice to study something I actually cared about was equivalent to dropping out of college, and she was going to tell everyone that, regardless of what the actual truth was. It's been really frustrating, and I wish my grandma would either listen to me or stop talking about my education to other people entirely. Now, whenever I see her at family events, I keep my academic life private. She doesn't get updates about my grades or my major anymore because I can't trust that she won't twist my words into some other false narrative. Your grandma somehow decided that the most rational response to you changing majors was to just tell everyone you dropped out. That's not protecting you or misunderstanding college. That's just making up a version of events that paints you in a worse light and then refusing to correct it even after you asked her to. She chose a narrative that was worse than the reality and stuck with it anyway. And then getting your parents involved didn't even fix it because she still didn't actually believe changing majors was legitimate. She was just silenced, not convinced. My mum invited my ex to family game night like we were all supposed to be friends now. I'm 24 years old and I dated someone for about 3 years. We were pretty serious, but things just didn't work out. We had different life goals and we weren't compatible long term. The breakup was mutual, mostly, but it was still a breakup. We're not together anymore, and we're not really in regular contact. It's one of those situations where we ended on decent terms, like we don't hate each other, but we're not friends either. We just went our separate ways. About 2 months after the breakup, my mum calls me up and asks if I'd like to come over for family game night. We do this pretty regularly, like once a month or so. My siblings come over, my parents host, we play board games, order pizza, that kind of thing. I said sure, I'd be there. I asked what time and she told me, and then casually mentioned that she'd also invited my ex. Just threw it in there like it was no big deal. Like, of course I'd be totally fine with my ex showing up to a family event. I was confused. I asked my mum why she'd invited my ex to family game night. She said because my ex was still part of the family in a way, and that they'd always been friends with my ex, so they didn't see why the breakup should change that. She said, just because we broke up didn't mean everyone else had to stop being friends with my ex. She was acting like I was being unreasonable for being uncomfortable with the situation. I tried to explain to her that it's different when it's your parent. It's one thing if I ran into my ex at a coffee shop. That's fine. But my mum actively inviting my ex to a family event feels like a betrayal. My ex would be sitting at my parents' house at a family event I'm attending, and that felt really uncomfortable to me. My mum wouldn't listen. She said I was being selfish and that my ex shouldn't be punished just because we didn't work out. She said my ex was a good person and they enjoyed my ex's company and they didn't want to lose the friendship just because my ex and I had broken up. I was frustrated, but I didn't feel like I could tell my mum not to be friends with my ex. That would be controlling. But I also didn't want to show up to game night and have to see my ex. The whole thing felt awkward and wrong. I told my mum I might not be able to make it to game night that month. She got upset and said I was being dramatic and that I was trying to force her to choose between me and my ex. She said if I really cared about her, I'd understand that she could maintain relationships with different people regardless of my romantic situation. That's not what this was about. This wasn't about me trying to force her to choose. This was about her inviting my ex to a family event without considering how I'd feel about it. I made up an excuse and didn't go to game night that month, but then my mum kept bringing it up. She kept saying how hurt she was that I'd skipped game night and that I was being selfish. She said my ex had asked about me and seemed disappointed that I wasn't there. So now my ex knew that I'd deliberately skipped the event to avoid seeing them. That was awkward. She even told my siblings that I'd backed out last minute and made it sound like I was being unreasonable. I heard from my sister that she'd defended my decision, saying that of course I'd feel weird seeing my ex at a family event, but my mum apparently brushed off her concern and said I needed to grow up. This whole thing became this big drama that didn't need to exist if my mum had just been considerate about the situation in the first place. She ended up uninviting my ex from the next game night after my sister backed me up and made my mum see how insensitive she was being. But by then the damage was done. I've tried to explain to her that I appreciate her being friends with my ex, but that I'm not comfortable with them attending family events. She doesn't get it. She thinks I'm being unreasonable and that I should be over the breakup by now. But being over a breakup doesn't mean I want to spend my evening with that person at my family's house, while we're all pretending everything is fine. She literally thought it was thoughtful to invite your ex to a family event without asking how you felt about it first. And when you expressed discomfort, instead of respecting your boundaries, she made you the bad guy for not wanting to sit through game nights with your ex. Now your ex knows you avoided the event specifically because of them, which is even more awkward. Your mum chose her friendship with your ex over your comfort at a family gathering. My brother made a dating profile using my photos, and I didn't find out for 3 weeks. I'm 19 years old, and I'm pretty active on social media. I have Instagram, I post regularly, I have decent photos of myself. My brother is 21, and he's been struggling with dating. He's not great at putting himself out there, and he's kind of shy around people he doesn't know well. He decided he was going to try online dating to meet people. But instead of taking his own photos or asking me for help, he decided to just use my photos without telling me. I didn't find out until my friend texted me saying they'd seen me on a dating app. I was confused and asked what she meant. She sent me a screenshot of a dating profile that used my photos, my face, my body, pictures from my Instagram. Someone had created a dating profile using my pictures. I was freaked out at first. My first thought was that someone had stolen my photos and created a fake profile to scam people or catfish people or something. I was about to call the police, basically. But then I looked more carefully to the profile and I recognized the writing style. It sounded like my brother. The profile had some of his humor in it, some references to things he liked. I was pretty sure it was him. I called him immediately and asked him if he'd created a dating profile using my photos. He tried to deny it at first. He said there was no way that was him, but I pressed him and eventually he admitted it. He said he'd been struggling to meet people and he didn't have good photos of himself. So he'd borrowed some of my pictures from Instagram to set up a profile. He said it was temporary, just until he got a few matches, and then he'd explain that it was him and not me. He said he was planning to tell people the truth before meeting up with anyone. So basically, his entire plan was to catfish people into thinking they were talking to me. He was going to lead them on thinking they were going to meet me and then show up as himself. How is that supposed to work? How is that a good idea? I was angry. I told him he had no right to use my photos without permission, and that what he'd done was basically identity theft. He was pretending to be me online. People were messaging the profile thinking they were talking to me. He was getting matches thinking he was me. I told him to delete the profile immediately. He got defensive and said I was overreacting. He said it was just meant to be a joke and that he wasn't doing anything malicious with the photos. He said I was being a bad sister for not understanding that he was just trying to meet people. Using my photos and pretending to be me online is not a joke. That's catfishing. That's deceptive, and it could seriously hurt people who thought they were going to meet one person and then got catfished instead. I told him again to delete the profile, and he finally did. But I was so upset by the whole thing. Not only had he violated my privacy and used my photos without permission, but he'd done it for weeks without telling me. My friend had to point out to me that I had a fake dating profile. I found out from someone else, not from my brother. He wasn't planning to tell me. If my friend hadn't texted me, I still wouldn't know that my photos had been used to catfish people online. My brother apologized eventually, but it felt like he was apologizing because he got caught, not because he understood what he'd done wrong. He said he was sorry for the trouble it caused me, not sorry for violating my privacy, not sorry for using my photos without permission. Sorry for the trouble, like it was an inconvenience rather than a serious breach of trust. He tried to laugh it off at one point and said it wasn't that big of a deal because the profile was gone now. I had to remind him that for 3 weeks, random strangers were messaging me thinking I was interested in dating them. For 3 weeks, his catfishing was active and he was getting matches by deceiving people. That's not just trouble, that's fraud. We've had a weird relationship since then. I don't really trust him anymore, and I'm very careful about what I share with him now. I keep my accounts private so he can't access my photos. I don't tell him where I'm going or what I'm doing. I've had to take protective measures against my own brother because of what he did. My therapist actually brought it up when I was talking about trust issues and how hard it is for me to feel safe with people close to me. She said what he did was a significant violation, and it made sense that I'd have trouble trusting him after that. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over the fact that he used my identity online to catfish people, and didn't even see why it was wrong. That's so much worse than just a stupid joke. He didn't just borrow your photos for a prank. He created an entire fake identity using your face and was actively catfishing real people for weeks. And he wasn't going to tell you. Your friend finding it is the only reason you found out. He was going to let you go on not knowing that your image was being used to deceive strangers. The fact that he apologized for trouble instead of understanding the actual violation shows he still doesn't get how serious it was. That's a form of identity theft, and he treated it like a minor inconvenience. My mum invited her new husband to my therapy session. I've been going to therapy for a few years now, and it's been incredibly helpful for me personally. Therapy has genuinely changed my life and how I approach my mental health. I finally found a therapist that I really clicked with and that I felt comfortable being completely honest with about stuff that I wouldn't normally talk about with other people. Not stuff I was embarrassed about necessarily, but just stuff that felt private and personal. Therapy became this safe space where I could talk about my anxieties and my insecurities and my family dynamics and everything else that's going on in my head without judgment. It was something I was really protective of, something that felt very private and personal to me. My therapist and I had built up this relationship over time, where I felt like I could genuinely trust her and be vulnerable with her in ways that I couldn't be with other people in my life. And then my mum started dating this guy, and things moved really quickly between them, like unusually quickly. They started dating maybe 6 months ago, and suddenly they're talking about getting serious, and my mum's inviting him to family stuff and basically treating him like he's already a permanent fixture in our lives. I don't have anything against him specifically. He seems fine. He's nice enough when I see him, but I hadn't really had a lot of one-on-one time with him or gotten to know him that well. He was still basically a stranger to me in a lot of ways. So when my mum called me to remind me about my therapy appointment, I assumed it was just a regular check-in type of call. But then she mentioned that she was going to be picking me up and driving me to my appointment that day, and that she was bringing her boyfriend along because he wanted to wait in the waiting room while I had my session. I thought that was a little odd, but I didn't think too much about it. I figured he'd just sit in the waiting room and read a magazine or something while I had my appointment. It wasn't like he was going to be in the actual therapy session with me. So I just said okay and didn't really think about it further until the actual day of my appointment came around. When my mum picked me up, her boyfriend was in the passenger seat and I got in the back seat like I'd planned. They were making small talk about some work thing, and honestly, I was kind of zoning out, just thinking about what I was going to talk about in therapy that day. I had some stuff I needed to work through, and I wanted to make the most of my time with my therapist. But then when we got to my therapist's office, my mum casually mentioned to me in the waiting room that she'd asked my therapist if it was okay if her boyfriend sat in on the session because he wanted to understand our family dynamic better and how therapy works. And she said it like it wasn't a big deal, like she was just mentioning that she'd asked if he could tag along to see how the whole process worked. I was absolutely horrified. I immediately told my mum that was completely inappropriate and that I did not want her boyfriend in my therapy session under any circumstances. This was my private time. It was supposed to be confidential. It was supposed to be a space where I could talk about anything without worrying about who was listening or what other people might think. The whole point of therapy was that it was confidential and safe. I'd worked really hard to build trust with my therapist. I'd talked about personal stuff that I'd never told anyone else. Family issues, past traumas, insecurities, everything. And now she wanted to invite a guy I barely knew to listen to all of that. My mum got defensive and said that she didn't understand what the big deal was. She said that her boyfriend was going to be part of our family eventually, and that it would actually be helpful for him to understand our family issues so that he could be more supportive and empathetic. She made it sound like she was doing me a favour by bringing him along and trying to facilitate better understanding between us. She said it was nothing to be embarrassed about and that he wouldn't judge me or think badly of me based on what he heard in therapy. She was completely missing the point. It wasn't about whether he would judge me or not. It was about my privacy and my right to have a confidential space where I could talk about my life without worrying about who was listening. My therapist actually backed me up on this, thankfully. She told my mum that therapy is a confidential space and that it would be inappropriate for someone who wasn't directly involved in my treatment to sit in on sessions. She explained that it could actually interfere with my ability to be fully honest and open in sessions if I was worried about someone I wasn't comfortable with listening in. Basically, if I knew someone was sitting there listening to everything I said, I'd start self-editing. I'd be worried about what she'd tell him later. I'd be thinking about how he'd judge me instead of focusing on actually working through my issues. My mum seemed surprised and kind of annoyed that my therapist was taking my side on this issue. She argued that understanding our family dynamic would actually be beneficial for her relationship with her boyfriend and that it would help him see where some of our family conflicts came from. My therapist had to very clearly explain that my therapy sessions were about my mental health and my well-being, not about helping my mum's relationship or improving family dynamics or whatever her motivation was for bringing him along. It wasn't my job to sacrifice my privacy and comfort for her relationship. This wasn't a couples therapy session or a family therapy session. This was individual therapy. My therapist eventually had to ask my mum to leave and come back to pick me up after the session was over. My mum left in a huff, clearly frustrated and annoyed that her plan hadn't worked out and that she wasn't getting what she wanted. She literally refused to pick me up at the scheduled time, and my therapist had to call her because I didn't have another ride. It was so awkward. After she left, my therapist asked me if I was okay and if that situation had stressed me out. I was genuinely shaken up by the whole thing. I couldn't believe my mum would try to invite someone into my therapy session without really thinking about how that would affect me or what my boundaries were. She was so focused on her new relationship and wanting to impress this guy and integrate him into our family that she completely failed to consider my feelings or my right to privacy. The whole situation made me really angry at my mum. It felt like she was prioritizing her relationship over my well-being. She was willing to compromise my sense of safety and privacy in my therapy space just to try to help her boyfriend understand our family better. That felt incredibly selfish and inconsiderate to me. I spent like half of my actual therapy session that day processing what had just happened in the waiting room instead of working on the things I actually needed to work on. My therapist was great about it, but I was still visibly upset and distracted by what had happened. The whole session was kind of derailed by the drama she created. I actually had to schedule an extra session to work through my thoughts about the boundary violation itself. I eventually brought this up with my mum after I'd had some time to process it. We had a pretty heated conversation about it, actually. I I tried to explain to her why I was upset and why I felt like that was a violation of my boundaries. She tried to argue that she was just trying to facilitate better understanding and that I was being too sensitive about the whole thing. She minimized what had happened like it was no big deal. She said that her boyfriend was eventually going to be hearing about my life anyway because he was going to be part of the family. So what was the difference if he heard some stuff from therapy? But that's the thing. The difference was that it was my choice about what I shared with him and when I shared it. She was trying to take that choice away from me and decide for me what parts of my private mental health journey he should be privy to. That's a pretty big violation when you think about it. It took a while, but eventually my mum kind of accepted that she'd overstepped. She apologised, though it felt a little half-hearted and like she still didn't fully understand why what she did was wrong. She said she was just trying to help and didn't mean to upset me, like her intentions made the action okay. But that's not how boundaries work. Your intentions don't matter if the outcome is that you've violated someone's privacy and trust. But the whole situation really highlighted for me how much my mum can sometimes prioritise her own needs and her own relationships over my boundaries and my well-being. It made me realise I needed to be more careful about setting clear boundaries with her and not expecting her to automatically respect my privacy without explicitly telling her to. I can't assume she understands what's appropriate. I have to spell things out. And honestly, that's exhausting. I shouldn't have to tell my own mother not to invite strangers into my therapy sessions. That should be common sense. But apparently, it's not. And now, I don't automatically trust that she'll respect my boundaries. I have to constantly be on guard and explicit about what I do and don't want her doing with information about my life. That's wild that she thought she could just invite her boyfriend into a therapy session. Like, confidentiality is literally one of the foundational principles of therapy. It's in the ethics codes and everything. Your therapist shut that down immediately, which is good, but the fact that your mum didn't see the problem with it shows she was completely missing what therapy actually is. She basically tried to turn your private mental health space into some kind of family bonding exercise. The audacity to call ahead to the therapist, not to the person actually in therapy, is just incredible. She went around you entirely to try to make it happen, and then when she got shut down, she acted like it was unreasonable and everyone was being too protective of privacy. That's some serious boundary crossing behaviour right there. This is your mental health we're talking about. This is confidential space designed specifically for you to be vulnerable and honest. My aunt pretended to forget my name because I didn't visit enough. This is honestly still such a weird thing to me because I can't even figure out what her end game was with this whole situation. Like, what was she trying to accomplish by doing this? My aunt lives about 3 hours away from where I live, and we used to see each other pretty regularly when I was younger. Growing up, I'd spend weekends at her place pretty frequently. We had a close relationship, and I have good memories of that time. But as I got older and went to college and started my adult life, I wasn't able to visit as frequently as I used to. Life just got busier and more complicated, and it became harder to make the drive out to see her. I wasn't deliberately avoiding her or anything like that. I was just dealing with my own stuff and trying to manage my own life. I had work and classes and new friendships and all the normal stuff that comes with becoming an adult. I still cared about her and we still had a relationship, but it wasn't like we were seeing each other every month or anything. I'd maybe see her a few times a year if I could manage it. We'd still text occasionally, and I'd call her on her birthday, and we maintained that connection even if it wasn't as frequent as it used to be when I was a kid. One time when I saw her at a family gathering, maybe like a year or so into my new living situation, she made this comment about how I never visited anymore, and how she barely saw me. I felt bad about that because I know she wanted to see me more often, and I felt guilty that I wasn't able to be there as frequently as she wanted. She had this tone that made me feel like I was letting her down somehow, but I tried to explain that I was busy with work and school and just life stuff, and that I still cared about her but just couldn't always make the drive happen. I talked about how I had work commitments and that the drive was pretty far, and it was hard to coordinate. She seemed to accept that explanation at the time, but apparently that wasn't the end of it at all. The next time I saw her after that conversation, maybe like a month or so later, at another family thing, she did something really weird. She called me over to talk to her, and when I came over, she acted like she didn't remember my name. She was like, "Oh, what was your name again?" I can't seem to remember, and it was so obviously fake. I know she knows my name. I've known her my entire life. She'd been calling me by my name just a few months earlier at the last family gathering. There's no way she actually forgot my name in that time frame. We'd literally just texted like 2 weeks before about some random thing. So I was confused and I asked her if she was joking. She insisted that she genuinely couldn't remember and asked me to remind her. I told her my name and she acted like she was just now remembering it, like some light bulb had just gone off in her head. She was like, "Oh right, of course, yes, that's right. Yes, yeah." It was such a transparently fake performance that I didn't even know how to react. I just kind of stood there confused about what was happening and why she would do that. There were other people around too, which made it even more awkward. Then she made this comment about how if I visited more often, she probably wouldn't have these memory problems. She said it in this joking tone, but it was very clearly a dig at me. She was basically saying that if I didn't neglect her and visit more frequently, she wouldn't be having issues remembering my name. Like she was trying to make me feel guilty for not visiting more often by pretending she'd forgotten who I was. It was such a weird guilt trip tactic. I don't even know if she realised how transparent it was, or if she genuinely thought it would WW. Orc. I brought this up with my mum later and told her what happened, completely confused and kind of hurt by the whole thing. My mum was just as confused as I was about why my aunt would do that. She said it sounded like my aunt was upset about me not visiting and was trying to make me feel bad about it in a passive-aggressive way. My mum even said something like, "Your aunt has always been a little strange about things like that. But like, if she was upset about me not visiting, why not just say that directly instead of pretending to forget my name?" It made no sense to me. There's literally no world in which pretending to forget someone's name is an effective way to communicate your feelings. I don't know what she thought would happen. Did she think I'd be so shocked and hurt that I'd immediately promise to visit more? Did she think it was funny? Did she think it was clever? The whole thing was just bizarre and weird and made me feel genuinely bad. Over the next year or so, my aunt brought this up a few more times at family gatherings. She'd make these jokes about her faulty memory and then make some comment about how I never visit. Like she was still trying to use this fake memory loss as a way to guilt trip me into coming to see her more often. At one point, she even introduced me to someone new at a family thing by doing the whole forgetting my name bit again. And I was just like, okay, we're doing this still? It was honestly exhausting because I felt guilty about not being able to visit more frequently. But I also felt frustrated that she was choosing such a weird and passive-aggressive way to express that. If she wanted to see me more often, she could have just talked to me about it directly. We could have worked something out. Maybe I could have planned specific visits or found ways to make it happen more often. I'm not against visiting. I would have made an effort if she'd asked nicely. But instead she chose to pretend to forget my name and make passive-aggressive jokes about it whenever we saw each other. Eventually I stopped visiting as much as I used to because the whole dynamic felt so weird and uncomfortable. I didn't want to be around someone who was going to make me feel guilty and bad about myself for having a life that didn't revolve around visiting her. I started avoiding family gatherings where she'd be there because I knew she'd say something about it. I know that probably hurt her feelings and probably made her feel like I was pulling away from her, which I kind of was, but it felt like she was pushing me away with her weird guilt trip behaviour. The whole situation is just so strange to me still. I genuinely don't understand what she thought she was accomplishing by pretending to forget my name. I don't understand why that was the tactic she chose to express her feelings. NGS about me not visiting. It didn't make me want to visit more. It just made me feel uncomfortable around her and made me not want to be in that environment. So the whole thing kind of backfired on her, if her goal was to get me to visit more often. It had the opposite effect. Eventually, she seemed to get the message that I wasn't coming around anymore, and she stopped with the fake memory jokes. But by then, the damage was done, and it was too late. The relationship never really recovered from that. I see her occasionally now, but we don't really talk about anything meaningful. It's just surface-level conversations about the weather or how work is going. The warmth that used to be there is completely gone now. That's such a bizarre guilt trip strategy. Pretending to forget someone's name just to make them feel bad about not visiting is so passive-aggressive and weird. Like if you wanted to communicate that you missed someone and wanted to see them more often, there are 1,000 better ways to do it than fake memory loss. Have a conversation, write a letter, call and say you miss them. But no, let's play this weird fake memory game instead. And then acting like she was making jokes about it when it was clearly deliberate just makes it worse. The fact that she didn't understand why that was hurtful is the real problem. There's no innocence there. That was pure manipulation. My cousin announced her pregnancy at my baby shower. I'm still kind of mad about this actually, which probably sounds dramatic, but I think it's genuinely justified in this situation. I've been planning my baby shower for a few months, and I was really excited about it. This was my first baby, and it was such a huge life event for me. I was nervous and excited and wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted it to be this special celebration of me becoming a mum and the upcoming arrival of my baby. I'd picked out the decorations carefully, chose a theme that I loved, ordered custom games, picked the food menu, and invited all the people I cared about. I even made little personalised favours for the guests. My cousin said she'd definitely be there, and I was excited to have her there because we're pretty close, and she's someone I actually wanted to celebrate with. We'd grown up together and she'd always been someone important to me. The baby shower was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon, and I was so excited leading up to it. All my friends were going to be there and my family was going to be there, and it was going to be this great day where I felt really supported and celebrated. I'd been planning it for like 4 months. The day of the party finally came, and I woke up excited, got my hair and makeup done, wore a special dress that I'd found specifically for the event. The party started, and people were arriving, and everyone seemed excited and happy. People were giving me gifts and saying nice things about how well I'd planned everything. They were complimenting the decorations and the food and asking me questions about the baby and my due date. I was opening gifts and people were gathered around talking about baby stuff. We were playing games and eating food and laughing. Everything was going really well. The energy was great, and I felt so loved and supported by all these people who cared about me. We'd probably been going for like 2 hours at this point, and we were in the middle of a game where I had to guess what different baby items were by touch without looking. And then halfway through the party, my cousin asked if she could make an announcement. I thought maybe she was going to say something nice about me, or read a funny story about when we were kids together, or something. Maybe she was going to share a memory about me being a good older cousin. I had no idea what she was about to do. She stood up in front of everyone and announced that she was pregnant. She was literally announcing her pregnancy at my baby shower. Like, not even as a side comment or a casual thing that came up naturally. She made a full announcement, stood up, got everyone's attention. She said something like, "I have an announcement that I wanted to make while everyone was together. I'm pregnant too." She was literally announcing her own pregnancy at my shower. The room went kind of quiet for a second, and then people started reacting to her announcement. Some people were congratulating her and asking when she was due and how far along she was. They were asking if she knew the gender yet. Suddenly all the attention that had been on me and my baby shifted to her and her pregnancy announcement. The focus of the entire room changed. I was absolutely stunned. I couldn't believe she would do that at my baby shower. This was supposed to be about me and my baby and my excitement about becoming a mum. And she just completely hijacks the whole event by announcing her own pregnancy in front of everyone. I tried to be polite about it in the moment, but I was genuinely upset. Like internally, I was absolutely fuming, but I didn't want to make a scene at my own party. I just kind of forced a smile and tried to move on, but the damage was done. The mood had shifted. People were excited about her news instead of focusing on me. I pulled her aside later after the shower and asked her why she would do that at my baby shower of all places. I genuinely wanted to understand her reasoning. She acted like I was being unreasonable and selfish for being upset about it. She said she was excited about her pregnancy and wanted to share the news, and didn't think it was a big deal to announce it at my shower. She said there was room for both of our pregnancies to be celebrated, and that I didn't need to be the only one getting attention. Like somehow both of us could have equal focus when she literally announced her pregnancy during my event. But that wasn't the point at all. The point was that I had planned this event specifically to celebrate my pregnancy and my upcoming baby. It was my day. It was the one day that was supposed to be about me and my joy and my upcoming child. She had plenty of other opportunities to announce her pregnancy to people. She could have called people individually and made the announcement personal to them. She could have had her own baby shower or announcement party if she wanted something special. She could have announced it at a family dinner where multiple people were being celebrated. She could have announced it literally any other time, but she specifically chose to do it at my event and completely steal my thunder. It felt deliberately hurtful and like she was trying to compete with me or one-up me somehow. I felt like she was trying to make it about her instead of letting me have this moment that was supposed to be about me and celebrating me. My mum tried to mediate between us and said that while the timing wasn't ideal, my cousin probably didn't mean to hurt me and was just excited about her own news. But I don't think that's a valid excuse. She knew it was my baby shower. She had to know that announcing her own pregnancy would shift attention away from me. If you've ever been to a baby shower, you know that all the attention is on the person whose baby is coming. That's the whole point of the event. I think on some level, she did it deliberately because she wanted the attention to be on her. Or maybe she just didn't care enough about my feelings to consider how it would affect me. Maybe she thought her news was more important or more exciting. Either way, I felt hurt and betrayed by her choice to do that at my event. It really damaged our relationship because I couldn't stop thinking about how selfish it felt. I kept replaying it in my head, thinking about how she could have just waited, even for like a week or two. The wait wouldn't have killed her. Every time I saw her after that, I thought about how she'd hijacked my baby shower for her own announcement. We're still family, and we still see each other at family events. But things are definitely different between us now. I'm not as close to her as I used to be, and I don't really trust her in the same way. I learned that she's willing to prioritize her own needs and her own excitement over being considerate of other people's important moments. That's not the kind of person I want to be around if I can avoid it. It shows a fundamental lack of consideration and empathy. When she had her baby, I went to visit because I felt like I should, as family. But it felt obligatory and cold compared to how things used to be. I didn't feel the same joy and warmth that I would have felt before. And honestly, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be around her. The worst part is I can't even look back on my baby shower photos without feeling angry and hurt. What should be happy memories are tinged with the resentment and betrayal. My baby's arrival should have been this joyous thing to remember, and instead I remember my cousin's selfishness, more than I remember the joy of celebrating my pregnancy. She basically tainted one of the most important moments of my life by making it about herself. The fact that she didn't just announce it but made a whole speech about it shows she knew exactly what she was doing. You don't accidentally steal someone's thunder at their own event. She literally stood up and got people's attention to make this big announcement in front of everyone. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was a deliberate choice. That was calculated. And then acting like you're being selfish for wanting your own baby shower to be about your baby is just gaslighting. She had 9 months to announce her pregnancy any other time. She could have posted on social media. She could have told people at work. She could have made a post on her personal social media. She could have literally done it at any point other than during someone else's celebration, specifically planned to be about them. The timing wasn't a coincidence, it was deliberate.